City Council meeting to order. Before we move on through tonight's agenda items, I'd just like to acknowledge our remote meeting format. On March 6th, I issued an emergency proclamation declaring a civil emergency in the city due to the COVID-19 outbreak. On March 19th, the Governor issued Proclamation 20-28 prohibiting meetings that fall under the Open Public Meetings Act, such as City Council meetings, from being conducted in person. The prohibition has been extended through September 1st. Today's meeting will be held entirely remotely. The meeting will be recorded, streamed live, and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting or make comments. For those members of the public on the call today, welcome. For those of you who submitted the online form to make comments, your name will be called under the audience comment portion of the meeting. And if there's anyone on the call who did not sign up but would like to make comments tonight, please press *3 on your phone and we will add you to the speakers list. At this point, we'll take a moment to do a roll call of the council members in attendance. So please say here when I call your name. Councilmember DeMichelle.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Thanks. Council President Hunt.
Here.
And Councilmember Martz.
Here.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Here.
And Councilmember Walsh.
Here.
Thank you. That's all 7 council members here this evening. There are also various city staff participating in tonight's meeting, including City Administrator Wally Bobkowitz, Deputy City Administrator Andrea Snyder, Parks and Community Services Director Jeff Watling, Interim Public Works Engineering Director Bob York, Human Services Coordinator Monica Negrilla, Sustainability Coordinator Megan Curtis-Murphy, Senior Budget Analyst Susie Monsal, City Attorney Jim Haney, and Deputy City Clerk Tisha Gieser. Other city staff may also be in attendance. We are also joined this evening by one of our consultants, Sean Korn with HDR. So I'd like to go over a few of the meeting guidelines. So for all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking and mute your microphone when you're not speaking. If you are also streaming the live video feed, please turn the sound off as there is a bit of a delay. And council members, please continue to use the chat function to indicate when you wish to speak. Please identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion or second a motion, or participate in debate. So the next item on the agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance. And if you could all keep your microphones muted, please feel free to welcome and join in with me as I read the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on our agenda this evening is audience comments. Please make sure you direct your comments to the whole of council and not individuals. And while this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up if needed. So when you are recognized, unmute your microphone. And if you're on your phone, *6 may be an option. State your name, address, and relationship to the city. Speak clearly and pause frequently, and please limit your comments to up to 5 minutes. When you're done speaking, please remute your microphone. If you do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed. You're encouraged to rejoin the meeting if able. Again, for those who have joined us tonight and would like to speak but did not sign up in advance, please press *3 on your phone, and we will call the first 6 digits of your phone number when it's your turn to make comments. Personal attacks, obscene language, derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. If a speaker is out of order, I will ask them to stop and mute their microphone. If a speaker does not comply, I may direct staff to mute their microphone. And if there is a disruption to the meeting and order cannot be restored, I may direct staff to remove you from the call. Citizen comments, written and verbal, are an important aspect of the public process. The City Council and my administration take these comments very seriously, and we thank you for taking the time to address us. City Clerk, could you please identify the first person who signed up to speak tonight?
Yes, the first person is Larry Franks.
Hello, am I coming through?
You are, Larry. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Tisha. My name is Larry Franks. I'm a 48-year resident of Issaquah at 24001 Southeast 103rd Street. The City Council is probably familiar with me as a fishy guy, advocating for the preservation and enhancement of salmon in our city, the county, the state, and the world. Recall that salmon are an indicator species, which means where they go, extinction or thriving, humankind will go. Humans may use technology to delay the effect, but we will definitely follow the lead of the salmon. So it behooves us to protect our salmon and protect our own existence. To that end, the proposed environmental board will help guide the city in preserving our fishy legacy and addressing climate change at this time. I look forward to supporting these efforts.
Thank you, Larry. City Clerk, who else has signed up this evening?
Next, we have Villette Nolan. Villette, I've unmuted you.
Go ahead, Villette.
Thank you so much. Good evening, council members and Mayor Pauley. I'm Villette Nolan, CEO of Imagine Housing, and we are a nonprofit affordable housing and services provider doing business here in Issaquah for 33 years. We provide housing and services for 151 households of almost 400 people, and that includes 75 youth under the age of 17. In fact, our very first apartment building is on Front Street with 14 units. And as the pandemic has unfolded, we've directly seen the hardship this has created on low-income households. Since March, our case management team has increased its delivery of services by almost 400%, and more households than ever are requesting assistance of all kinds. But rent is the most pressing need. In late June of this year, we established a $300,000 rental assistance fund for our residents, and we have so far raised $175,000 from private sources. Eastside Legal Assistance Program is administering the fund for us, and our residents apply directly to them. I'll refer to them as ELAP. I've shared with you earlier the letter that we shared with our residents in mid-July to explain to them how to apply. That letter was translated into 14 languages. In Issaquah specifically, we've had 29 households with 76 people apply to ELAP for a total of $36,000 in rental assistance, and that number is as of today. We know that some households who are behind in their rent have not yet applied to ELAP, and unfortunately, due to reporting capacity of other systems that they might have applied to, we don't know if they've applied elsewhere. We're here to request that the City Council strongly consider allocating funds towards rental assistance for these households, and that you consider Eastside Legal Assistance Program as a potential viable source for administering some of your funds. We totally expect to have to raise more than $300,000. That was our shortfall as of June 30th, and as the pandemic wears on and the low-income community members do not return to work, we expect non-payment of rent to continue throughout the year. Thank you so much for your consideration of our request, and I look forward to talking to any council members that have questions.
Thank you, Villette. City Clerk, who is next up on our speakers list this evening?
Next, we have Connie Marsh. Connie, I've unmuted you.
Go ahead, Connie.
Hi, City Council. Okay. Hey, City Council and Mayor. This is Connie Marsh. And I have spent the last 2 weeks thinking about city processes, and you have received some of my process thoughts up to a level 6 review flow chart, because while you discuss policy, the way things get done is they go from your policy into implementation language somehow, and then they turn into reality. And what I do is when you set up new systems, I try to figure out how those systems that are being created will become reality and what that will look like on the ground. Now, with the master mobility plan, I'm in the fog. I am lost. I cannot see how what is written at this point in time will turn into a reality. 238 pages just makes it a smear of gray to me, and the policies will be removed from some documents and placed in this document, and we no longer have a path. So I would ask that that document be pulled back and heavily reviewed before it gets pushed forward to PPC. I would even like to see it go out to the community via a remote video call, similar to the environmental board video calls, which were actually great. Now, the document that was created that you are looking at in a sort of a review tonight has an equal amount of grayness as I try to follow the pathway to see how a potential plan, whatever those plans are supposed to be, would then come to this board, be decided by this board, and then move forward. I am not assured that this is any more clear than the River and Streams Board pathway. To be able to look at projects, which to me is an important thing, going to Development Commission, even in the short term, is equally murky. So I also think, while I think the Environmental Board is a good idea, this needs to be looked at through a realistic eyeball, and it's not there yet. So then I watched Planning Policy Commission, that is supposed to actually have weighted decisions, write a letter that was trying to get the council to look at more flood hazard changes in the future. Yet I found that on the consent calendar today. So when they had an express opinion that differentiated itself from the staff opinion, that was not pushed forward for the council discussion. And so this leaves me, again, fretting about the process, because if the Environmental Board is supposed to have a weighted process, yet these processes don't get shown to the council, how are we actually solving any problems? So I think we need a consistent method set down for council to understand what things can and cannot be put on the consent agenda that are coming from community commissions. And I think I will stop with that. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Connie. City Clerk, who's next on our list tonight?
Next, we have David Johnson. David, I've unmuted you.
David, we cannot hear you yet.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm David Johnson. I'm calling about the 7% increase for water. And my confusion is, why aren't the developers, the big developers such as Raleigh and others in the area, when they go to build, why aren't they taxed for that infrastructure that's necessary for that building? They're pocketing the money, and the burden is going on the citizens and the residents of this community. Why is that?
Thank you, David. Did you have any additional comments? That question, we don't typically answer questions at this time, but we can respond in an email or with a phone call to that question. Did you have other comments you wanted to share as well?
Sure. I'm a previous water distribution manager and wastewater treatment plant operator, and I see a 7% increase is just outrageous at any time, and especially right now when people are burdened and don't have incomes coming in. I think the time of it is terrible, and that we've gone about this the wrong way. The developers in most states would have to pay for that as they build, before they build, to get the permits to build. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, David. City Clerk, is there anyone else signed up to comment tonight?
Yes, next we have Susan Neville. Susan, you're unmuted.
Hello, this is Susan. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just great, Susan. Thanks.
Great. 2825 Northwest Pinecone Drive, Issaquah, 24-year resident, happy resident, let me tell you. And I just wanted to comment on the Environmental Board ordinance draft before you tonight. What I noticed first off was the amount of meetings per year, which were 10. And I'm wondering if during our discussions it wasn't picked up that people had mentioned maybe this Environmental Board should be meeting more than once a month, especially early on during the setup and the processes being put in place. And I'm not sure this is where you would put it. This is a document that you would include that, but I would like to put that out there. And then page 4, when you speak to duties and responsibilities, I feel the wording is not very specific. Could be open for interpretation, which is what we have issues with today. And I believe that we're trying to close that up. And based on the new current wording, is the new board no longer reviewing land development that includes critical areas? I couldn't find anything of notation within this. And my next point was the checklist. The concept was evolved to create an early partnership between the various parties involved in a land and building development that included environmental critical areas. Maybe the affected parties should be part of the initial checklist discussions, because as it is written now, it is determined, it is based on how the checklist is being put together. I don't even want to begin to explain what I think it says. So lastly, between now and January 1st, how are the private and public developments that do involve critical environmental areas being monitored? And will a plan be put in place to cover it between now and January before the new board is up and running? And I would really like to get a comment back on that if possible by somebody. And lastly, I just want to thank all the effort, time that the administration and Megan and even the community has put into this new board. And I really look forward to having something exciting in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. City Clerk, do we have anyone else signed up to speak this evening?
Yes. Next, we have Danny Madden. Danny, I've unmuted you.
Hi, my name's Danny, and I'm a student at Issaquah High School, a rising senior. And I just want to comment today on my support of the environmental board, specifically the fact that we will have, I believe, 2 youth members on the board. I think that's a really good idea. However, I do have some suggestions. Reading through the document, I think that it might be smart to specify what the youth duties are, as they often don't really have specific expertise in some of the areas that the environmental board will kind of be advising on. I think that it might be good to specify what exactly would be required from a youth member. Secondly, I think that it might be smart to discuss some of the things that will be used to measure the success of the environmental board. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think this is a really good thing for the future and just making Issaquah a leader in sustainability in general. And I'm very excited to see what happens. And thank you all for working so hard on it.
Thank you, Danny. City Clerk, next speaker this evening.
Yes, and real quick, I'd like to mention that anyone on the call who didn't sign up to speak or indicate they wish to speak can press *3 on their phone. That's *3 to raise your hand, and we'll add you to the speakers list. So the next person who signed up to speak is Ann Fletcher. Ann, I've unmuted you.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Ann. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm Ann Fletcher. I'm a resident of Issaquah, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. And I'd like to speak about the Environmental Board proposed ordinance. I have written some comments that are more detailed, but I wanted to highlight a couple of things in the public comment here today. First of all, I want to heartily thank everyone who's working on this for strengthening the proposal since it was last looked at. And I would like to, especially in terms of giving some examples of things that the board might provide feedback on, and that their written recommendations would accompany the items through the approval process, as well as that the decision maker will give substantial weight to the recommendations of the board. Those comments were heard and incorporated, and I wanted to thank everyone for working on that. a couple of points that I want to make about this current proposal is about the sunsetting of the Rivers and Streams Board. If it's dissolved, making sure that the things that it did are covered before the board and even after the board, in terms of making sure that the critical areas studies that they did, and even they had in their job description, when appropriate, environmental impact statements. They had some pretty important things there, and just making sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater there, and incorporate somebody covering those things. I'd like to comment on the objective of the environmental board. The objective being to advise the mayor, city council, and city departments on the plans, et cetera, for environment. And to me, that's more of a duty. And I would like you to consider that the real objective of this, if you think about it and consider it, is to help the council and the city to achieve the goals of environmental stewardship that are in the comprehensive and strategic plans. That would make it a lot clearer, I think, if that were the goal, then how to go about putting that into the plan, into the board's ordinance. The other thing that I'd like to talk about is in the duties and responsibilities is that one of the important parts of this environmental board is having to do with climate change. And two things that the board might be able to look at higher levels would be capital improvement projects and transportation improvement projects, which the council looks at once a year. And because these projects affect the building and transportation areas that contribute, there are two top contributors to carbon emissions. And then I have a couple more comments. One is that if the Development Commission is going to take on things that the Rivers and Streams Board has done in the past until the new board is ready, I am wondering about the capacity for them to do that and the time it will take, if it's a short term or perhaps a long term thing. If the environmental board might be a resource for the Development Commission, not to take over their job or to be redundant or supplant them, but just to be a resource to them. Or if someone on the Development Commission, if some of the members could have some environmental expertise, I think that would be super important. The built environment is our biggest contributor to carbon emissions, so that's something that really needs to be addressed. Someone already mentioned the checklist. I also would like a better definition of that and how that would work. And finally, I want to let you know that I realize how busy everyone must be with the COVID and the budget issues and the racial justice issues, and I am so grateful to you for taking on the environmental things, all of you. It has such a great potential to protect our environment. And I know that you will use your authority to create the strongest conditions possible and take the time that's needed so that we do this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. City Clerk, do we have anyone else signed up to speak this evening?
Yes, we have Christy Triple. Christy, I've unmuted you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Good evening, Council and Mayor Polly. This is Christy Triple. First of all, I wanted to thank you all for your screen time needed and dedicated since the onset of COVID. It's taken a lot of resources and resourcefulness during this difficult time. It's really thrown a wrench in all of our lives in one shape or form. Again, I'm Christy Triple. My address is 1595 Northwest Gilman Boulevard, Suite 1 here in Issaquah. So I work for Raleigh Properties, and also I am a citizen who cares very deeply for Issaquah. I have two short issues to comment on that arose since yesterday, so I apologize for not signing up earlier in the day to speak. First of all, my comment generally is by now, you all likely have heard about the Costco armed robbery early Sunday morning. And I don't know if you've noticed the uptick in crime, but it's concerning for our community. With unrest and a recession, we must retain every police officer we have, as public safety is paramount. I make this comment this evening as I know that Council is soon entering into budgeting for 2021. We'll be reviewing the police department budget in greater detail and still yet must address this year's anticipated $2.5 to $3 million revenue shortfall. And then secondarily, I'd like to make comment on the rental housing assistance ID 0738 options as an informational update. I just learned today, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more about this soon, the Washington, if not already, the Washington State Department of Commerce just announced today it's distributing approximately $100 million in state coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security CARES Act funding through its existing network of homeless service grantees and organizations serving homeless youth to operate a new rent assistance program launched just August 1st. The program will focus on preventing evictions by paying up to 3 months of past due, current, and future rent to landlords eligible participants. This rent assistance program will address some of the needs resulting from the coronavirus pandemic and hopes to reduce some of the stress both renters and landlords are both facing now and into the future. Assistance is limited to 3 months and the program plans to end December 31st, 2020. I hope with this news just announced today, it places less pressure on Council to act, staff strain to address, and to have a bit more peace of mind knowing existing providers of services will have more resources now to aid those in need. For even Bellevue City Council, with its 145,000 citizens, many more staff and own needs, will look to the federal government to address this important issue financially. My deepest admiration goes out to all the many local nonprofits and our city staff working to make a difference during this difficult time. I'm glad to know the federal resources have been made more readily available. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment this evening.
Thank you, Christy. City Clerk, are there any additional speakers this evening?
Yes, the caller with the number 972786 has raised their hand. I've unmuted you.
Hi, my name is Ellen O'Hara. I'm not from Issaquah. I live in Kenmore, work in Redmond, but I am on the board of Imagine Housing and therefore have have an interest in the presentation that Villette Nolan made tonight as CEO of Imagine Housing, and I just wanted to speak up to support her request for the council to consider rental assistance. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Is there anyone else signed up to speak this evening?
No, indeed, there are no other members of the public on the call who haven't made comments.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank everybody who took the time tonight to join the Council and Administration at our City Council meeting. We heard from several speakers about the Environmental and Sustainability Board, a new board that the Council is hoping to form. Some positive comments on forming it and some concerns and questions around clarity of mandate, whether or not there should be project review, how the transition would work this fall, the number of meetings per year, and critical area review. We also heard some comments on what the roles of student representatives should be. We heard a request this evening for city funding to go to ELAP to support distressed renters in Imagine Housing residences in Issaquah, and also some late-breaking news from Washington Department of Commerce about $100 million in CARES Act funding that they are putting back out into our communities. We heard concerns over utility rate increases and their possible connection to new projects. We heard about the Costco armed robbery this weekend and the potential uptick in crime as we move through a difficult time, and how that could impact our policing resources. And also we heard about the Mobility Master Plan and that it needs more work before it's completed. So I want to thank all of you for coming in this evening and sharing that with our City Council. At any time, you can also write to citycouncil@issaquahwa.gov to share your thoughts on any of the topics. And in addition, any comments that were received by email prior to the meeting on tonight's agenda topics will be acknowledged by the City Council President Hunt under the relative agenda item while we are doing our remote meeting format during this emergency. So the next item of business is committee and regional reports, and I'm going to call out the council members by name, and we'll start with Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. This is Councilmember Zach Hall. I have 2 reports for this evening. First is for Cascade Water Alliance. So on Wednesday, July 22nd, Mayor Polly and I attended a meeting of the Cascade Water Alliance Board of Directors. We were presented with additional information regarding the organization's budget and proposed water rate increase. In particular, staff again emphasized their desire to increase rates starting next biennium, which begins next year in 2021. Staff believes, pulling from some of my notes from the meeting, staff believes that this is a watershed moment for the organization. And 1, if there's any delay in water rate increases, or 2, any uncomfortable cuts to the budget, those could have profound consequences to the water futures of Lake Tapps Reservoir. Mayor Polly and I voiced our city council's concerns regarding raising rates during a struggling economy. In particular, Mayor Polly emphasized our own uncomfortable budget cuts and advocated that we continue to study the organization's budget and look for additional cost-saving measures. And I asked the board to consider the bigger picture. Making cuts here and there, canceling contracts may be uncomfortable now, but we also have a broader obligation to consider the ratepayers, the families who are struggling to make ends meet during the COVID-19 emergency. So leadership has scheduled an additional special board meeting a week from today to continue this discussion, and we'll have more to report later on. But if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to follow up with Mayor Polly or myself. Next is for the Affordable Housing Committee of the Growth Management Planning Council. Also on Wednesday, July 22nd, I attended that committee meeting. King County staff presented educational information regarding strategic regional acquisition for affordable housing and unused and novel revenue sources. Some really interesting stuff I'll be following up with staff about. We also had a briefing from the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, followed by a discussion about how best to advocate for statewide policy changes during the next legislative session. That is still ongoing. We don't have an answer to that yet. Finally, the committee approved a letter to send to Governor Inslee and the state legislature advocating for an extension to the eviction moratorium and some of the other policies that we've even considered here in council. And a few days later, the governor extended the eviction moratorium through October 15th. Finally, we had hoped to have a discussion about our continued work updating the housing chapter of the countywide planning policies. So Deputy Council President Ray and our good friends at the Growth Management Planning Council could see our hard work, but our agenda was quite ambitious, so we didn't get to it. So we'll be discussing that at our next meeting later this year. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with me. Otherwise, that concludes my report, Mayor Polly.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you. This is Councilmember DiMichele. I've attended 2 meetings of the Eastside Human Services Forum Legislative Committee, which is preparing for August meeting of the Association of Eastside Agencies, and that will help Eastside Human Services Forum set its legislative priorities for 2021. This week, I have virtual meetings of the Eastside Human Services Forum Board of Directors and the Healthier Here Governing Board on Thursday, August 6th, and a combined meeting of transportation boards on Friday, August the 7th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember DiMichele. Up next is Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Walsh, and I have no report tonight.
That's short and sweet. Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here, and I too have no report.
And next on to Councilmember Marks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Marks. Well, it's August, and when electeds take well-deserved time, throttle down, fewer meetings. Puget Sound Regional Council Growth Management Policy Board, August meeting is canceled. Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee, August meeting is canceled. So all of us can enjoy less time in our council and legislative meetings and enjoy this fine August weather. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Mertz. Deputy Council President Ray.
Hi, this is Chris Ray. Thank you, Mayor Pauley. I have no report this evening.
Wow, we are on a roll. I know Council President Hunt's going to have something for us, though. Council President Hunt.
I have no report this evening.
Oh, wow. Okay, that was surprising. Okay. Thank you for that. The next item is the mayor's report. And just pulling this up. There will be an executive session this evening to discuss pending and potential litigation per RCW 42.30.110(1)(I). The item is expected to last approximately 30 minutes and no action is anticipated in open session. I'm very pleased to announce that the city was recently awarded a $2.2 million federal transportation grant by the Puget Sound Regional Council. The grant will be used to acquire right-of-way for the Newport Way project from State Route 900 to 54th Street in 2024. Newport Way between State Route 900 and East 54th Street is an important local and regional corridor that provides access to a fast-growing area of the city. This project will improve safety for all users of the corridor and provide facilities for pedestrian and bicyclists. And for those that are watching from home, this is the section of corridor that has the newly acquired Bergsma property on it. Shoreline Master Plan and Flood Hazard Code update. On the consent agenda for the City Council consideration this evening are the Shoreline Master Plan and the Flood Hazard Code updates. Both of these updates are required by state law. The updates we are asking City Council to approve tonight meet and in a few cases exceed the state requirements. Throughout the update process, we have heard from members of our community on the importance of doing more than just meeting the state requirements to protect our natural environment and supporting salmon populations. I appreciate the comments from the Planning Policy Commission's July 9th review of the Flood Hazard Code Amendment and agree that the City Council should consider dedicating resources for future revisions of the code, which include feedback and input from the public. The updates on the docket tonight better enable us to protect our natural environment. But to do more, we need time for additional public outreach, and we would like our new Environmental and Sustainability Board to assist us with these updates. Adopting the plan updates we have tonight does not preclude us from doing more in the future when the Environmental Board is fully formed and as staff and other necessary resources become available. Many of these plans were initially written decades ago and have been updated with new requirements throughout the years. Our town looks very different now than it did in the 80s and 90s, and we need to review our environmental goals and look comprehensively at the effectiveness of these plans to protect our environment today. The administration is in support of adopting these updates now so that the city will not be out of compliance with state and federal requirements. And in particular, we want to ensure that the update of the Flood Hazard Code is completed by mid-August to prevent a situation where Issaquah residents and businesses would have difficulty acquiring flood insurance. For these reasons, the City Administration is recommending adopting the Shoreline Master Plan and Flood Hazard Code updates this evening. Another item on tonight's consent agenda is Agenda Bill 7781, Teamsters 763 Collective Bargaining Agreement. I'd like to give a brief summary on bargaining work for the year. The City now has 6 bargaining groups, AFSCME, which is our general employees, our Teamsters 763, which are public works operations, IPSSA, the Police Dispatch Records and Corrections, IPOA, Police Officers and Corporals, and new in 2020, Teamsters 117 representing the police sergeants and Teamsters 117 representing police commanders. These groups represent over 61% of our staff. Our human resources team has been negotiating for successor bargaining agreements since late last fall, as 3 of the 6 units had contracts expiring on December 31st, 2019. Those were AFSCME and Teamsters and IPOA. Last time we bargained for successor agreements, it took an average of 18 months after expiration to get an approved contract. This time, we have 3 contracts before council within 8 months of expiration, including our first all-virtual contract negotiation with AFSCME, and the contract that is on the consent calendar for approval this evening. Due to the COVID pandemic and the difficult financial situation our city finds itself in, it has been necessary to have additional discussions with our bargaining units. We've finished bargaining for furloughs and concessions with 4 of the 6 units in that time frame as well to reduce budgetary issues and save additional positions from layoffs. The unions have been very creative with a mix of furloughs, benefits, concessions, layoffs in some cases, and wage freezes to meet the city's financial needs, and we will continue to bargain with the additional 2 groups. The Human Resources team has already begun bargaining with IPSSA for a 2021 plus successor agreement and expect to begin contract negotiations with our own police sergeants and commanders unions this fall. I want to thank all that have been involved in working with our labor groups this year and to say thank you to our union teams for working with us through some difficult conversations. It's taken a lot of work and collaboration from all parties to achieve this. And that concludes the Mayor's report this evening. Moving on to informational updates. The first item is ID 0738, rental assistance options. And at the July 20th City Council meeting, Council directed the administration to bring forward options for rental assistance to tonight's meeting. And I'd like to ask Human Services Coordinator Monica Negrilla to present this item.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the Council. This is Monica Negrilla in Human Services. We can begin the slide. Thank you, Tisha. So, as Mayor Polly mentioned tonight, we are returning to Council to provide additional requested information on the rental assistance measures the city may consider in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Specifically, we will cover housing data that includes estimated levels of overdue rent, options for various levels of rental assistance, and a few updates on other local and regional rental assistance programs. Next slide, please. A few words on background. On July 20th of this year, we provided an informational update regarding housing stability. The City Council directed us to return at the first meeting in August to provide options on what a possible rental subsidy package would look like for a potential small, medium, and large investment by the city. Next slide, please. So moving on to the actual update, since our last presentation, we gathered additional data from the U.S. Census Bureau and from ARCH. What you see in front of you are low and high range estimates for renter-occupied households and for low-income households in Issaquah, in particular those who are at or below 50% of the area median income, or AMI. We started with the estimated number of households in Issaquah, which is around 15,000. Next, we looked at the total number of renter-occupied households, which ranges between 6,200 and 6,600. And then we followed that with looking at the low-income households, in particular those who are at or below 50% AMI. These households range between 3,700 and 4,100. As a reminder, a 4-person household at a 50% AMI in Issaquah has an annual income of $55,000 roughly. Next slide, please. So we used the information about low-income renter households and the estimated percentage of low-income households behind in rent, excuse me, to calculate a monthly and then a 3-month estimated cost for rent that's past due in Issaquah. So again, we started with the estimated number of Issaquah renter-occupied households at or below 50% AMI, and that is between 1,800 and 2,400 based on ARCH data. And then the estimated number of renter-occupied households at or below 50% AMI that are currently behind in rent. So that estimation, we estimated that number ranges between roughly 568 on the lowest range and up to 1,400 for the highest range. These numbers assume that between 30 and 60% of residents in the low-income housing units in Issaquah are behind rent. And so also the past due rent ranges between 1 and 3 months. So based on these, our calculations, we estimate that the monthly amount of rent that's past due at a $1,700 monthly rent for those who are low income ranges between $965,000 and all the way to $2.4 million per month. Of course, the numbers increase if we look at a 3-month estimate, and those numbers can be anywhere between $2.8 million and $7 million. These estimates do not take into consideration future changes in number of households who fall behind rent or additional months as time progresses. Next slide, please. So I'm going to cover a few options for various levels for possible rental assistance. As a brief reminder, in March of this year, the council allocated $100,000 towards rental assistance to help community members impacted by COVID-19. The initiative approved by council focused on assisting households with incomes at or below 80% AMI, and the assistance provided was up to $500 per month for up to 3 months. Considering that the large majority, nearly 80% of those who were assisted during that time had incomes at or below 50% AMI, and based on more recent council feedback, the options that we are providing tonight for consideration focus on households with incomes at or below 50% AMI, and of course those who are impacted by COVID. So the assistance levels proposed consider increasing the level up to $1,000 per month for 3 months. And so the amount proposed would cover a higher percentage of the monthly rent than in the prior assistance, which was at $500 per month. The options in front of you provide details for assistance at $150,000, $300,000, and $450,000 in assistance. And with these numbers, anywhere between 150 and 450 households could benefit from a one-time assistance, or between 50 and 150 households could benefit from a 3-month assistance. If an allocation for rental assistance is discussed, we believe that a few factors should be considered because the levels proposed are higher. We would like to highlight that perhaps an administrative cost to account for program capacity and implementation should be considered. Typically, this administration cost ranges between 10 and 15% of the total allocation. And also perhaps consider additional providers to administer the program. You also heard some comments from some guests tonight, but also considering the capacity of the 2 organizations that we used in the past would be helpful. With that, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. And so I wanted to also provide a couple of updates regarding other local and regional rental assistance programs. Since our last update to council, we learned that additional federal financial assistance is expected, as well as other state and county allocations. And the additional federal financial assistance expected is different than the update that you just heard earlier, also during comments, public comments regarding the Department of Commerce allocation. And so it is different than the other updates that we provided previously. I do have, however, just a brief update regarding those previously mentioned rental assistance programs. So one, you heard the Department of Commerce that they're moving now to implementation in King County, is working now for the King County portion of that rental assistance program, and they're getting pretty close to launching that program. Also, I mentioned in our previous meeting in July some CDBG funds, the Community Development Block Grants. We also obtained a brief update on those. And the King County is also working on implementation for that program, and they scheduled to launch distribution of that rental assistance for mid-August. And so we will continue to monitor any other related financial assistance programs that might become available in the upcoming weeks and months. And with that, we are ready for questions and comments, but perhaps before taking questions, I would like to check in with City Administrator Bobkowitz in case he might have any additional comments regarding city budget or any other comments for this one.
Thank you, Monica. City Administrator Bobkowitz, do you have any information to add?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Monica, thank you, members of the council. Good evening. What we've tried to do is give you an overview of what we think makes sense. As Monica indicated, the need is potentially very great. And as the City Council considers its options, I just want to put the larger city budget issues in some perspective. We'll be coming back to you next week with more details on that. We're still in difficult financial times. Everyone is in difficult financial times. So I would just want to remind the council that there's a lot of moving pieces to rental assistance. There's lots of moving pieces to issues regarding evictions. We stand ready to answer questions that you have, but would just encourage that you keep top of mind the resources that we have available to us. I know you're all aware that the federal government continues to discuss funding for state and local governments as part of an additional bailout package. Those talks have not been fruitful at this point, so there is currently no money on the table for state and local government. I think if that were to change at some point, certainly that would provide a little bit of additional financial flexibility for us. But again, just wanted to put a little context to the good work that Mr. Grilla did. We certainly want to be as helpful and supportive to our community as we can, but there are financial parameters we need to keep in mind. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Administrator Bobkowitz. So I'm getting some sign-ups for questions. Let's go to Councilmember Hall first, followed by Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Councilmember Zach Hall. Thank you so much, Monica. Great information. So appreciate you putting this together so quickly, too, and everyone else that helped. Obviously, it's a team effort. With regard to the county CDBG CD program and this state commerce funding that's going to flow through King County, after these are being implemented, do we as a city have the ability to work with landlords to make sure they're notifying their tenants about how they can apply for these existing pathways, or is that difficult on our end?
No, thank you. Actually, great question. We've been advocating to the county and providing feedback over the last few months and trying to improve the processes because I think in the previous rental assistance rounds, there was a concern that by the time the entire population learned that funds were already exhausted. So with that, we are working with the county in making sure that all of the communities have access to information in timely manner, and so therefore they can access those resources. I've been checking. I checked in on Friday with both the CDBG managers and with the assigned manager for the commerce money. So as soon as I'm on their list, as soon as we find out information, we will share that with our nonprofits and residents. So,
did you have a follow-up, Councilmember Hall?
Just a short one, Mayor Pauly. This is Zach Hall again. So we have an existing pathway for nonprofits. Is there a difficult pathway for us to communicate exactly with all the landlords? Issaquah? So private landlords too?
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, and I apologize. Yeah, I did not clearly answer your question. I think the way we can reach clearly to landlords so far, it is through the rental assistance programs because they work directly with the landlords. However, another idea, as I'm just listening to you, might be also to check in with our economic development manager to see if she might have additional connections with landlords that I might not be aware of. So thank you for that. I'll make sure that I will reach out.
That's a great question, Councilmember Hall. I do believe that when we passed different tenant issues, we were able to contact property owners. So that's a great follow-up, Monica. Thank you. Councilmember Hall, did you have any more questions? I'm going to move to Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Martz. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to Monica. This was exactly the information that I was hoping to understand where the need currently is in the city. I mean, it's a range. Engineers deal in orders of magnitude. We understand the order of magnitude of the need out there. With the extension of the eviction moratorium currently through at least October 15th, I think the urgency or the potential urgency of council action is somewhat lightened. I understand the administration's argument around wanting to understand better our financial needs as we approach the end of the year. Certainly, any action that the council would take would be as sort of an agent of last resort when all other avenues are expended, and right now there are still other avenues. So the urgency that I had to examine this issue a couple weeks ago is at least deferred at this point. And so I think that council may still, I personally may still want to look at this issue as you get further into the fall. If it looks like the eviction moratorium might be lifted statewide, and see where this all goes. But for now, I think understanding the magnitude of the problem in front of us, understanding what money would or wouldn't move the needle, this information is extremely helpful. And I think it's also helpful for the public to understand. I think a lot of what's going on right now to folks who aren't in difficult straits is difficult for other folks to understand, and this is extremely helpful. So thank you again, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Martz. That's great feedback that this actually gave you some of the context that you were hoping to get. Next up is Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt, and my comments are similar to Councilmember Martz. I really appreciate the information. I do think it gives us a sense of the need. And because of the eviction moratorium, which I am very grateful for and I think is very necessary, one side effect, though, of the eviction moratorium is that we do not see the need in the same way that we would if we did not have that eviction moratorium in place. It's sort of papering over a growing problem for our community, and that problem is exacerbated by that people may not have the same options that they would have otherwise in terms of moving in with family members or finding another place to live on short notice if they were to be evicted. So I continue to think that this is a serious concern. I appreciate the update. I think it will be important for us to continue to monitor the situation in terms of what other government entities are providing and where there might be gaps in that, and what our community needs are as well, and what our community is receiving from those various programs and funding sources. As Councilmember Martz said, I think the urgency is not the same today as it was when we originally considered this, but there still will be a time, I think, when the eviction moratorium ends and when we will have to reassess. And so I will be continuing to monitor this, and I think it's very important that we continue that. And the last thing I'll say is that we have in our strategic plan a number of goals around addressing the needs of those that have housing insecurity. And we also have references to our housing work housing strategy plan, which also has a number of issues that we have worked on. So I think that this is in keeping with Council's goals over a long time, but we find ourselves in a completely unprecedented situation in terms of the need in this particular area. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. I'm going to go to Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you, and I will join my fellow council members in thanking Monica for a really, as usual, as always, thoroughly researched report, and it's very appreciated. And I agree that it provided me with a lot of context going into our budget deliberations and understanding the full picture of what we're facing here in terms of human needs, but also our own budget needs. I just wanted to provide a word of caution about the $100 million in funding. I think that it's going to behoove us to be working really closely with our state representatives and our state senators to ensure that that we impress upon them that even though we are generally an affluent community, that being poor in Issaquah is no less worrisome than being poor in South King County or poor in Seattle. And often, because we are generally an affluent community, we are overlooked when funds are being distributed. So I think we're going to need to advocate clearly that there is a need in Issaquah and that those funds will be helping people in need here as well. So that's my only warning about getting too complacent or comfortable with the idea that money's coming down the pike. In my experience and the experience of other human services agencies here in Issaquah, it doesn't always end up coming to Issaquah just because of the perception of what our community is and is not. So again, many, many thanks to Monica. And I agree with Council President Hunt that there will come a time when this information will be very helpful because at some point the eviction moratorium is going to have to come to an end. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMichelle. I'm not seeing any other new commenters, so I'm going to head back to Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. Zach Hall again. Just a couple of final comments. Most of my comments were stolen by my colleagues, which is fine. But I also want to call out, acknowledge, and recognize that the numbers we got, clearly there are a lot of rent burden individuals here in Issaquah, but that also highlights the number of property owners and landlords that are also feeling the pain right now. So I also just wanted to call that out to ensure that they know that we see them and we hear you. And I guess the only other thing I'll say is I love having engineering brains on our council. It's just great, isn't it?
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. At this point in time, I'm not seeing anything else in the chat box about additional speakers, so I would like to thank Monica and City Administrator Bobkowitz and ask if you need any additional information from the council or if we're good to move on to the next item.
Madam Mayor, I think we're good. Again, thank you for the council for your discussion, and it's an evolving issue, and we'll talk more in the future.
That is great. And I believe that I forgot, as usual, to go to Council President Hunt to ask her if she had any emails on this subject. So Council President Hunt, sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. We did receive an email which had supportive information regarding the situation of residents behind on rents and the needs of Imagine Housing residents in Issaquah.
Thank you, Council President. So there is no formal council action being requested this evening, and it is anticipated that this item will return to the City Council for action at the September 8th. Oops, reading off the wrong part of my script. My apologies. There's no formal council action being requested. However, the council may choose to make a motion directing the administration to return with a specific proposal, which we did not hear tonight, but we heard loud and clear that updates are requested as new information comes forth. So thank you very much for that. The next item on our agenda this evening is ID 0739. It's the Environmental Board update, and I'd like to ask Sustainability Coordinator Megan Curtis-Murphy to make a presentation. Welcome, Megan.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm Megan Curtis-Murphy, Sustainability Coordinator with the City of Issaquah, and I'm here tonight to provide an update on the Environmental Board. Next slide, please. I recently presented on the board proposal at the July 14th study session. Since then, we have developed a draft ordinance that I will discuss this evening. I'll also provide an update on next steps as we are not asking for council action tonight on the proposal. As a reminder, the City Administration is recommending sunsetting the River and Streams Board and creating this new environmental board to advise the Mayor, City Council, and City departments on a wider variety of environmental issues, including climate change and the protection of the natural environment. Next slide, please. I want to provide a brief summary of the comments we heard at the July 14th study session that have helped refine the draft proposal that is included in the agenda packet for this evening. Starting with the title of the board, we heard a preference for a shorter, more direct title, so have changed the proposed name to Environmental Board rather than Environment and Sustainability Board. There was a lot of discussion from the Council about the best way to approach protection of the environment from development in the community. This was a topic that we heard a lot of engagement from the community on as well. Overall, there was preference from the Council to have the board provide a higher level advisory role on environmental plans and regulations rather than doing permit review, as there's already an established body, the Development Commission, that does this work. Several council members also stressed the importance of needing to prioritize the Title 18 code updates so the board can help shape the environmental regulations that will guide all development in the city rather than the project-by-project approach. As I mentioned, there was a lot of engagement from the community, and this is something council valued and believes will provide for better environmental outcomes through the board when we have this level of engagement early in the process on policies and programs relating to the environment. There was discussion about the interim period between River and Streams and this new board. Understanding that we do not have a quorum for River and Streams and that there's a need to provide some oversight on projects now before the code can be updated, the city is proposing a higher level of review by the Development Commission, including discussion of the SEPA analysis. That's the State Environmental Policy Act. Currently, staff includes a short blurb in the staff reports indicating SEPA has been completed and they attach the SEPA decision. This change would be to include more information on the SEPA analysis to facilitate a more detailed discussion on SEPA at the Development Commission meetings. We'll continue discussions with the Community Planning and Development Department to ensure a more robust conversation about the environment occurs at these meetings. We also heard a desire for the recommendation to have substantial weight, which can be included in the duties and responsibilities that we'll review. There was a suggestion that this board may need to meet more frequently to catch up on some work. We acknowledge that this is probably the case in the beginning, at least, but have kept the ordinance language to meet at least 10 times per year, recognizing that several boards take off a month in the summer and/or December. During the recruitment process, we'll establish that the board may meet more than once in the beginning. Next slide, please. This slide reflects the updated name of the new environmental board with the same objective to advise the mayor, city councils, and city departments on the city's plans, policies, regulations, and programs relating to the protection of the environment and climate change. Again, the themes of climate change and overall protection of the environment were the most frequently heard through the public engagement process, so were important elements to include here. The objective itself is written similar to the several other boards and commissions, with the objective being to advise. For example, the Parks Board provides guidance and direction, and the Transportation Advisory Board makes available additional expertise and advice. Next slide, please. Since the last meeting, the overall components of membership have remained the same. We have, however, specified the age for the 2 youth members in the draft ordinance. 1 youth shall be at least 15 years old, but not yet 18 years old, which is the same that's specified in the Transportation Advisory Board. And the second one shall be at least 15 years old, but not yet 25 years of age, which allows for either high school, college, or young professional membership for this second position. As similar to the other boards with youth, recruitment will be done through the Youth Advisory Board, as well as several other channels, including the Issaquah School District Green Teams, which we've seen a lot of engagement from in both the brainstorming sessions, as well as the 2-part climate convening we had just last week. As specified here and in the ordinance, the majority of members will be residents of Issaquah. We are also seeking a diverse board in age, ethnicity, and professional backgrounds across a variety of environmental topics. As demonstrated through the engagement process, we also have a lot of residents that may not have professional background in the environmental field, but do have an interest in serving on the board. So we want to ensure some spots are open for community members with a demonstrated interest in the environment as well. Next slide, please. This slide is a list of the duties and responsibilities for the Environmental Board, which comes directly from the draft ordinance. Overall, it's very similar to what was presented at the study session with a couple updates, so I'll review each item. The first duty is to provide feedback on city plans, regulations, and codes that impact the natural environment to ensure alignment with community vision, including but not limited to Shoreline Management Program, Storm and Surface Water Master Plan, and Title 18. This is where we envision the board having teeth. They'll be working to shape the laws of the city that will guide development. We will encourage board members to do their own due diligence and follow development projects in the city so that they can start to understand the code, note issues, and be prepared to make improvements to it that will ensure protections for the environment, particularly with the updates on Title 18. I also think the SEPA discussions at the Development Commission will help inform this. This board will issue board statements to track their recommendations throughout the approval processes. These recommendations will be noted to have substantial weight for the decision maker. Directions for these statements will be that they should be given full and careful consideration in the decision-making process. Next is to review research and best practices to advise on environmental policies and ordinances for the city. The board will also develop and maintain an environmental and sustainability checklist to be used on the projects. Again, this is another way for the board to develop a tool that will help reduce the impacts of development on the environment. And this tool will be developed working with the board itself as we start to scope it. The board will also advise on planning and prioritization of actions related to climate change and resiliency. As I mentioned, we just had the community convening on climate the past 2 weeks, and this board will be able to advise and provide input on the recommendations that come out of this community effort. Next is to develop recommendations on programs, services, and priorities relating to environmental sustainability and protection. The board will also provide an annual report to the mayor and city council on work plan activities and accomplishments. We've heard this report should focus on impacts. With the board, I expect we will develop additional goals related to climate, which we can then report on. And we'll also look to align with other work on measurement occurring in the city and can add additional metrics as needed. And last, the mayor can direct the board to perform any other duties as may be prescribed in the ordinance. Next slide, please. The last update is about the timing for the board. Since the ordinance includes changes to Title 18, the city's land use code, there will be a public hearing on the draft ordinance conducted by the Planning Policy Commission on August 13th. The commission will provide a recommendation for city council consideration and will return to the council for anticipated action on September 8th. We'll begin recruitment for the board following the council meeting in September, and then interview and select board members in the September-October timeframe. Mayor's appointments will be brought to the City Council for confirmation, hopefully in late October or early November, and the first meeting is anticipated to be in November. Thank you for the input that has brought us this far, and I look forward to returning to Council in September.
I'm assuming that is the wrap up, and I'm looking over at the chat to see which council members would like to start with questions or comments, since we did have a lot of public input on this item as well this evening. And to catch back up on my time, I will start with Council Member Goodman, followed by Council President Hunt. Oh, sorry, followed by Council Member Martin. Council Member Goodman.
Thank you. If Council President Hunt wants to go first with the email comments, if that's how we usually
yes.
go, that's fine.
Thank you. Council President Hunt, would you like to go update us on the emails?
Yes, thank you. I will quickly do that. This is Council President Hunt, and we did receive a fair number of emails on this topic, and I'll specifically go over the ones that we received on this agenda item, because we have also received numerous emails the other times when council has discussed the formation of the environmental board. We received an email urging us that it's the time to step up and that we could be a standard setting city for the region. we received a comments that supported one of the speakers this evening and had some additional requests and concerns that were in that email, including that this board, or recommending that this board review the CIP and the TIP, so capital improvements plan and transportation improvements plan, and then also consider having expertise in the environment on the Development Commission. And then we received an email urging that this board review commercial developments and also have more teeth, or a way for their recommendations to stick more than the substantial weight wording that is currently given as far as their recommendations. And we also received a infographic to support one of the community members that spoke earlier. And in the infographic, there was recommendation to specify the youth duties, to recommend sustainable habits, and also to have measurable goals. And that it concludes the comments that we received.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. Back to Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goodman here. I first have a question, a little bit about process. I see that this is now going to Planning Policy Commission, and just to make sure I'm clear here, you're looking for feedback and comments tonight. That would be in addition to what PPC provides, and then back to us on the 8th. So for action, this is proposed to be our last opportunity to provide comments, except when we get to September 8th, correct?
Megan, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yes, that is correct. So we had originally been planning to come back to council this evening for action, but we'll be making this first stop at PPC. But yes, if there's any comments, I believe this is the first time the council is seeing the full draft ordinance. So if there's any comments on that, we'd be happy to take that before my PPC.
Great, thank you. I would first request that we get added to whatever presentation we're going to get on the 8th. We get a presentation about what a summary of what PPC, added to our presentation, not just in written form, just sort of a brief summary about what PPC said. And my comments are these. First of all, I think we're getting pretty close. I appreciate all the work that's been done, and I think we've gotten a lot of really thoughtful feedback. We got, or several of us, or all of us, I don't know how many, I know I did, got a few ears full from several people in the community who have been very involved in this. And I don't mean just from this particular initiative, but going back 20, 30 years. And even one former member of the city council who is a leader in the environmental issues here in Issaquah, David Kapler. And I just want to say how much I appreciate all those comments, and I take all of those comments very seriously. These are folks who are in the trenches, so to speak, who work with our processes, who care deeply about our community, who know probably more about our processes and what goes on in between all of our boards and commissions and council, probably more than almost all of us on council. In one degree or another, every one of us is sometimes involved. The people who are involved in this environmental board formation out in the community, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they know usually a lot more than I know I do, because we're spending our job doing this, they're spending their job being watchdogs out in the community. So I take it seriously, and I really appreciate it. So some of these comments you will recognize from the comments. I may see them differently, but say them differently, and some of them are strictly my own. First of all, overall, I want to say that we got the ordinance, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate the agenda bill. It's still a little bit unclear to me as I'm reading through the ordinance and trying to figure out what changes, what it looks like, how this actually works. It is a little bit unclear to me. We haven't had a suggestion for a flow chart a couple of times, And I think that that would be very, very helpful. Which types of projects go where, what's the trigger, when does it go to development development to commission, when might the environmental board weigh in, how that happens, what's the timing. As a person, an applicant, a couple of years ago on a project in the city, I can tell you that it is a heck of a job just trying to figure out what the process is. And so as I read this and look at as a regular, who just did a big sigh of relief as I'm talking. It might have been there. I can tell you that I look at it now with that type of a hat on, and I think it's a little bit unclear. And Megan, I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying that I'm unclear, and I think a flow chart would help. As far as the checklist goes, I know that needs to be created. I think that what we have learned recently or in the past few years, as when we have a new process, if we use the checklist and have a mock project or take a project that a land use application and then see what that looks like if you apply the new checklist. And I think we will learn about maybe how that checklist works. So I would suggest that we do that when we have a checklist. I agree with the comments about the objective or objectives of the environmental board. I think that needs some improvement. If you compare what river and streams was, and I printed it off and it said they have a responsibility, and it talks about what their responsibility is, and it talked about reviewing things and making things better. And this one just says the environmental board is concerned with things. I think that needs to be beefed up significantly about what their objective is. Their objective should not be advising. EIS review, that dropped off out of the code, and it's not back in to the environmental board's responsibilities. I don't know if there's some specific reason why that dropped off, and I would like that explained. Otherwise, I think it should be added back in. I also, like we heard a comment, I also found that land use applications are not specifically referred to in the new ordinance and the code. So do I think they need to review them? Yes. Public and private projects, both, yes. CIP and TIP, I think probably yes. If there's a reason for no, then I would like to know that. I'd like to know what the trigger is for projects getting reviewed. I really like the comment tonight about specifying youth duties. What would be the expectation or the responsibility of the younger members? How do we measure the board's success? That kind of goes back to the objective, and I think we should take seriously the comments we heard from the public about that. Specifically, what would the annual report consist of? That needs to be more specific. And I think that's all I have right now. But I want to emphasize that I do think that we're getting close. And I really think that this is, as of what we have right now, I think it's a really good piece of work. And I think we just should keep on going, see what PPC says, and really should add and take seriously much of what we heard from the public. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to City Administrator Bobkowitz and or Megan to see if there's any of those items that you can respond to before we move to the next set of questions and comments. City Administrator?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Megan and I can kind of tag team this. Let me speak first regarding project review. We are proposing that the Environment Board no longer do project review of any kind, so they would not be looking at any level of project. We spent a good deal of time taking in the feedback from the council from your last meeting. We looked at ways that they could continue to do project review. We spoke with planning and community planning and development staff about what rivers and streams had done. I think we learned that what was in the code and the work that the committee had previously done were perhaps not as consistent as it would need be. Our biggest concern is that the administration feels that the focus of the board should really be on policy. It should not be reviewing individual projects, but should be setting policy and recommending policy to the council as how projects should be reviewed by staff and by the Development Commission. So I think that is a very key point, and the ordinance clearly deletes sections of existing code where there would be that review of plats, which is currently in the code, and the environmental documents. We're also concerned about the amount of time we can ask volunteers to spend working on these various issues. The Development Commission is focused on this land use. We believe that beefing up their review of environmental documents is really the key. The other key, quite frankly, is Title 18. The Title 18 needs to be revised. We feel that the Environment Board can play a real key role in the revision of Title 18, but we're not proposing that it would have any review as far as any projects moving forward. A couple of the other items, and Megan can catch me for the things I'm missing. We can certainly talk about the youth roles. I think our view would be to not have them be a secondary role, that they would have the same role as all the other members of the Environment Board, be fully participating members. So I think that would be important to include. Megan, why don't you help me with some of the other items that were mentioned?
Sure. I just want to second that about the youth role, at specifically the climate convening and the brainstorming sessions on this environmental board. I think everyone on the call was really impressed with the youth engagement on it. So I would want them to be full members without that secondary role that we were just talking about. Agreed with wanting to kind of hear if we're going in that right direction. So as Wally mentioned, we do not have any development review in it right now, listening to the previous feedback on that. I think the annual report, we can add some more specifications to that with some measurements is what I'm hearing, wanting to make sure that there's specific impact in that. So we'd be happy to include that. I think that's most of what I heard from those conversations.
And Madam Mayor, if I can just follow up one last piece on the measurable results. The climate convenings that we've been having with the community over the last few weeks, I think one of the outcomes is likely going to be the recommendation to move forward with some sort of climate action plan. And it is very standard in communities that those plans have measurable goals in them. And I think it would make sense for the Environment Board to be the keeper of that plan and to provide oversight and direction as to how the city achieves the goals that would be outlined in such a plan. And I think the measures would come through that as well. So we're all for making sure that that is there, but there's probably going to be multiple components to measurement on the goals of the board.
So two of the questions or comments, this is the mayor, that Councilmember Goodman brought up that I haven't heard yet is process, flow chart, and timing, and how does this work? I'm assuming that question applied to projects, and if they're not doing project review, that's why that is not being talked about. And then the second one was checklist, which was a process that the Environmental Board would develop for use by the Development Commission. Is that the intent of that?
That is, and so we would
their review.
Exactly. So they would have the existing SEPA review that would be required, but we would also have an additional Issaquah checklist that would be included with that. I think that again, from the issue of teeth, let's have the board consider what policies make sense, and then bring those policies forward. And so the checklist we thought was the best policy. Put it in the ordinance. There may be additional things that the board over time also recommends.
Okay, thank you. Going to move to Councilmember Martz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Councilmember Martz. Just want to touch on a small and hopefully non-controversial element of this. Thrilled to see a engagement role for the Youth Advisory Board. I think that I've never made a secret of the fact that the Youth Advisory Board took my shy and reserved middle schooler, and over 6 years that included full membership in the Human Services Commission and the Parks Board at differing times. In fact, I remember her coming home with the giant Human Services Commission binder, the giant 3-inch thick binder with all the funding presentations that she would have to study as homework. Turned her into the confident and empowered young woman who's giving back to the world, starting a master's program in public health graduate program later this month at Columbia University. And so the city's role in engaging with you, YAB, and bringing forth youth leaders is really something that our generation didn't have as kids. We didn't have, we saw the way things got done was this sort of shadowy world that the grown-ups went off and did. And kids nowadays have an ability to get involved and see that correlation and maybe decide to to choose a career making the world a better place, like my daughter is choosing. So I'm just really happy, and I know that youth advisory board members have served well on their various commissions, and so I hope that they do take this opportunity to get engaged and become better leaders of environmental stewardship. The next generation of environmental stewards. Issaquah has a long and illustrious history, and maybe we'll bring forward that generation here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Martz. Moving to Councilmember Hunt for a question and a comment.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. We have consistently heard questions about the responsibilities that were in the ordinance for rivers and streams. What will happen to those reviews especially concerning the interim time between when the new board is really operational and now when we don't have a quorum for the rivers and streams. So that's my question. What is the process that we will be using for projects that would have been reviewed by the rivers and streams that will come up in the near future?
City Administrator Bobkowitz?
Working with the community planning and development staff, we anticipate there are probably just a handful of projects between now and the fall. Our recommendation is that the administration would direct staff to bring those issues to the Development Commission and have an extended dialogue at the Development Commission. Because once this new board is in place, that is the role that we are recommending the Development Commission have.
Council President Hunt, you also had a comment or additional question.
I do, thank you. Like Councilmember Goodman, I think that we're on the right track. I think there are some remaining questions that are lingering especially as far as the interim time, because not only does it take a while for the new board to get up and running, but then also for them to actually make the code changes that will be necessary to have an impact on projects. That's another step, and that all takes time. So to have processes for us to continue to have environmental review in the meantime, I think is important, and I think we should be clear about what that looks like. I also like the idea of a flow chart. I think it could be more than projects, but also policies. I remember when I was on Planning Policy Commission, we had a architectural design standard document that Development Commission members came and spoke to us about, and they explained how they would use it, and that really helped us make comments on it. And so, I think that understanding the workflow of what happens to your recommendations is really empowering for these commissions, and it makes you better able to serve in that commissioner role. So I think that a flow chart would be good. I certainly would appreciate it as well in terms of what kinds of policies get touched by which commissions, and then which ones go to from different commissions and how they all work together, because it's non-trivial, but I do think a flow chart would help. And then I think it's great that this will go to planning policy as the next step. I would like to hear what they have to say, and I also think that we should be. We have heard a lot of really great comments and input from the community on this, and I would like to be open to this next round at the public hearing that Planning Policy will have, and then the Planning Policy Commissioners themselves, what feedback they have. And so I think we have another opportunity to make revisions based on that, and I would like to be open to that because I do think it's going in the right direction, but I would like to be open to changes that they might recommend, especially as commissioners. I think that could be really valuable. And then I also think the checklist seems like something that would be, like with the flow chart, if you could explain what happens with this checklist, that would be useful to me. I think just some more process-based, more process-based information would be helpful in understanding the role. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President. I'm going to give Megan or Wally a chance if there's anything you wanted to add in there before I move to the next question or comment. Okay. Megan?
I think just that I hear the comments about the flow chart, so we'll be sure to include that in the next round and definitely bring back the comments from PPC. So thank you for that.
Great.
And the checklist.
And also to make sure that we are respectful to all those who have tracked this item through the many, many months and provided comments. PPC really should be given links to all of what's already happened so that they can, people don't have to show up to everything to be heard 3 times in order to get it across once. So great comment. Thank you. I think I'm going to Councilmember Hall right now.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Councilmember Zach Hall. I had a long list. I've crossed off most of them, so I'll be brief because the people before me have said it all. I first just want to comment on whether or not we should specify the role of youth on the committee. I've met with the Issaquah High School Green Team, and before I joined council and before COVID, Councilmember DeMichelle and I met with the Issaquah Youth Advisory Board, and there are some just really savvy, smart young leaders in our community, and I would really like to just empower them to show up however they want to show up and fill whatever role they want to, so we're really elevating their voice and not in any way hindering that. So I would just advocate that we not specify exactly what role we want them to fill, because it should be their role as young leaders to decide what they want to contribute. So that's how I feel on that. I also I think it actually might have been the same community member who brought up the idea about recommending sustainable habits for community members. I thought that was such a cool idea. I'm not sure if maybe that's something we need actually in the ordinance, but perhaps that's something that the board can look to put in their annual report of some kind. I'd be interested in council members' thoughts on that too. That concludes my comments. Oh, Mayor Pauly, I'm finished with my comments.
Okay, I've been talking to myself for 2 minutes. Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Now it's Councilmember DeMichelle.
Oh, that's always the fun part of this meeting. I'm going to key off of Councilmember Hall's remarks because I'm kind of struggling with the comments that were made about specifying the role for youth. And in my last 10 years, a lot of work on boards, commissions, and committee meetings and so forth that included youth. And I fully agree that they should be complete, full members of the board. I think that they should come to the table, be able to vote and participate in every way like every other member. What I'm struggling with is that I think that sometimes when the preponderance of people at the table are adults, that the strengths of the young people are either ignored or not allowed to flower. I would echo Councilmember Hall in that I hope there's some place in here for young people to bring their strengths. And their strengths, in my opinion, as an adult, is that they have their ear to the new generation and new ideas and creativity, and we can see that in the flyer that Danny sent us. They have unique ways of expressing themselves, and it's often eye-opening to the adults that are in the room. And then young people like action. They feel urgent about this issue in particular. And again, I think that voice is really important to hear and to allow them room in the proceedings to take action, do action, bring action to their fellow young people in town. So I don't know if any of that could go into the ordinance. If we were to specify a particular additional role for young people, I think it would start with talking to young people and finding out what they think might belong there. But I think that it can happen that if there's a preponderance of adults in the room, then everything is run the way adults want it to be run, and they're there because they're young, and those are the strengths that they bring. The other thing I wanted to comment on was I really liked Megan's comments about the additional things that would be measured and how the board would develop some measurements around climate action. I like that. I still feel like the way the ordinance reads, that the report will be on activities and accomplishments, just kind of lands with a thud, in my opinion. And I'm just wondering if we could just strengthen the wording there. The board will be responsible for a report on activities, accomplishments, and climate measurements, or I will let you write the wording, but I just think that needs to be strengthened so that it's clear that there are some results that we're expecting to have come out of the environmental board. So those are my comments. Thank you. And Megan, wonderful job. And I agree with everyone else who says we're almost there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember DiMichele. I'm going to circle back at this point to Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goodman here. Following up on the youth comments, I don't know the person who had public comments about the specifying the youth role. They sounded youthful, and I thought it was an interesting comment. My support of that comment had nothing to do with limiting the role, and had everything to do with making sure that we clarify that role. And I was thinking about that, and then Councilmember DiMichele said exactly what I was thinking, which is, as we sit here and try to figure out what we might want to do, all of us being, or at least almost all of us being way older than 25 and certainly older than 15, maybe we should ask how we could be helpful, not in limiting, but as Councilmember DiMichele said, when you get a bunch of adults together, it can be, I'll just use the word intimidating. And I've been on boards with youth, and they can be very quiet because it is intimidating. So maybe asking them what we can do to help provide some helpful guidance in any of the ordinance or the code or any other supplemental documents that the environmental board might use that would help the youth provide their voice on that board. That was where my head was at. So I think we don't want to necessarily limit as much as we want to maximize their ability to contribute. And so however we want to do that, I think we start by asking them, some folks, and maybe the person who spoke tonight, Danny, maybe we could ask that person what they thought. My other and last question tonight is about Title 18. So the last time we talked about the environmental board, I specifically asked what it would take to get Title 18 revisions rolling again, because that's been on hold and that hasn't been presented tonight. So I'd like to know where we are with that. I specifically asked what it would take to get it rolling again in terms of resources. And so I would ask that question now.
Great question. Thank you. City Administrator Bobkowitz.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Goodman, members of the council. It really comes down to resource allocation. We need both city staff to work to coordinate and facilitate the process, as well as consultant staff. As you know, the council, through the budget reductions we made in the spring, reduced the funding available for those consultants. We as staff have been talking about what we need to do to begin to start that process up, and we need to identify resources, again, both staff and consultant resources, to move forward with this. The council has my commitment that we will do that during the month of August. and with the hope of having a plan to get that process restarted in the fall.
And I just want to, this is the mayor, I just want to add on to what the administrator said, just so it's clear for the public. The council was provided information about budget expenditure reductions, and it wasn't necessarily a council direction at all to stop working on it. It was more of a financial response by the administration in order to close the gap. And so the enthusiasm for Title 18 has never waned one day. So Councilmember Goodman, I think what you're hearing is some thought going in August into how to getting this going again, because it does seem like it is a significant priority for the community and for the council. Does that answer your question?
Well, not exactly, because I want to know what it would take. I don't think we have a specific answer about what it would take. And just as with all the other priorities that we have a budget coming up here starting just in a few weeks. And that's going to be one of all of those priorities that we have. And what we heard from the public is significantly since the last time we had this meeting about the environmental board is exactly what President Hunt said, and that is that there is a gap. And if we're wanting the environmental board to be at the policy level, we have to have a policy that we're comfortable that they can implement. That's where my huge concern is, to be clear.
Thank you. Thank you. And City Administrator Bobquist, when you talk about revisiting in August, did you mean as part of the budget process or as part of a 2020 conversation?
I think at this point we're revisiting it on the staff level. It is, in my opinion, first a city staff resource issue and then a dollars and cent consultant issue. We need the ability for the city staff team to focus. That includes Deputy City Administrator Schneider, Community Planning and Development Director Niven, and others. They're part of the 2021 budget process, knock on wood, will be concluding shortly. And my hope is that once their large role in the budget has concluded at the end of August, that perhaps they will have some additional time while others of us are working with you on the 2021 budget, that they can also work with you separately. The ad hoc that was assembled, that would be the next first specific step, would be to reconvene that ad hoc, look at schedules. We've never talked specifically about community engagement on this topic using video. We've had some good experiences over the last few months, which we didn't have when we last talked about this in April and May. So I think that if we can free up those key staff members to reconvene the ad hoc schedule, then we can look at the balance of the fiscal year to see what consultant resources are available. And I'm confident that we can find then the dollars and cents to pay for those consultants in the fourth quarter.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I see Deputy Council President Ray has a comment.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Chris Ray. I was really struck by the comments of Council Members Hall, DeMichelle, and Goodman about youth involvement in the Environmental Board. And it occurred to me that this is only one of many boards that we have youth representatives on. And what we should be looking at is a larger, how do we get our boards to operate across the board in an inclusive manner, so that we do board training and we get everybody in line with the different points of view are what makes for a rich conversation. It might be I come from a different socioeconomic background, or it might be my age, or it could be anything. But what makes the community great is those different perspectives. So what I guess I would like to see, not only for the Environmental Board, but for all of our boards and commissions, is ongoing member training so that they do have an appreciation for the different things that the different board members bring to the discussion.
That's great. Thank you for that suggestion. I am not seeing any other comments or questions at the time. Oh, am I off again? I'll give it a second to see in the chat box if anybody would like to have a follow-up. I'd like to thank Megan and Wally for providing the presentation and the information and the Q&A this evening. We're now going to move to our consent calendar. The consent calendar was distributed to council in advance, and if authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered together and approved under one motion. Have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
They have.
Thank you, Councilmember Marks. Thank you, Council President Hunt. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? Council President Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's Council President Hunt. I would like to move AB 7962 to regular business.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We'll remove that one down. Looking at regular business, we'll slot that in at A under the agenda, so it'll be the first item under regular business. And any other council members desiring to remove anything from the consent calendar? And I'll go to Council President Hunt. Have you received any email comments from the public that you would like to share on the consent calendar items?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we did receive an email comment on AB 7962, which is the flood hazard, the Area of Special Flood Hazard Code updates, Issaquah Municipal Code 16.36, and that is also the item that I pulled down off of the consent agenda. And the comment that we received by email from a member of the community was that this community expressed that they thought it was disrespectful to PPC to have this on consent, and that the PPC's comments should be considered with this agenda bill.
Any other comments?
No.
Thank you very much. Has there been a motion? Council President Hunt?
I move to adopt the consent calendar as amended.
Is there a second? Deputy Council President Ray.
This is Chris Ray. I second the motion.
Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. We're going to do a roll call vote. City Clerk.
Yes, beginning with Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
Councilmember DeMichelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Marks.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Moving on to the next item of business, which is our regular business. We will start with the AB that Council President had removed from the consent agenda. Council President, would you like to talk about that first, or would you like a very, very brief introduction of the AB by City Administrator Bobkowitz?
Thank you. If it would be possible to have a very brief overview so we know what we are talking about, that would be great. Thank you.
City Administrator Bobkowitz, could you give us a very, very brief summary so that we have some context for Council President's comments?
Sure. Madam Mayor, Council President Hunt, this item has been before the city for some time. We received a letter from FEMA on February 19, 2020, stating that they had finalized the new flood policy maps per the National Flood Insurance Act of 1968. The city is required to adopt these. With the COVID-19 crisis, this issue has been delayed. We are now here before you with that. As has been mentioned, this item did go before the Planning Policy Commission on July 9th. The Planning Policy Commission recommended approval of the amendments as submitted to the City Council. In that approval, however, they also commented 3 things, requesting that the Council dedicate resources for the continued revision of areas of special flood hazard code amendments, to return this issue to them for their 2021 work plan, and as a priority item, schedule concrete work sessions to collect further feedback and public input on these code amendments. And as Mayor Pauley stated in her comments at the top of the meeting, it's the administration's intent to ask the council to consider dedicating additional resources for the areas of flood management as part of your 2021 budget discussion. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mayor, you're on mute.
3 strikes and I'm out, right? Okay. I think I'm on number 2. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion.
Please go ahead.
I move to adopt ordinance number
2915.
Amending Chapter 16.36 of the Issaquah Municipal Code relating to areas of special flood hazard, providing for severability and establishing an effective date.
And it looks like Deputy Council President Ray.
Hi, this is Chris Ray. I second the motion.
Thank you very much. Council President Hunt, a comment.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. My motivation for moving this off of consent was that I did want to acknowledge that planning policy did make a specific recommendation on this, that we consider improving this plan in the future and going above and beyond the minimal requirements. So much like in the mayor's remarks this evening, I wanted to acknowledge that council, I think, knows that we have these plans that we need to allocate resources to update and to bring best practices, best available science into these plans, because they are, they need to be reflective of the community values that we have around environmental sustainability. And the other one that is on here as well is the Shoreline Master Program. Both of these, I think, would be plans that are very important for our community, and they would be they would benefit from this new environmental board review, and they would definitely benefit from a look at them, at how we can improve them so that we can live up to our community's values of environmental sustainability. So I wanted to pull this down so we could acknowledge the planning policy's recommendations and also commit to revisiting this. And we are adopting this plan this evening, but we know we have work to do.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Walsh. Also, having come from the PPC as my background, I am a little bit frustrated that we as council that there isn't a better staff process, administrative process for providing us direct recommendations from our very valued boards, so that we get that in front of our eyes when reviewing something. I think, for me, the issue wasn't necessarily that this was on consent, but rather that the recommendation wasn't put in front of us in some way that we can address it. Either it comes to us by an email, or it comes to us via a mayor's report or something else. So I'd just like to bring that up as a, hey, how can we do better next time? And I would appreciate that the administration takes a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. I am going to ask City Administrator Bobkowitz in a second. I just wanted to point out that in the past, we've had this come up as well, where in particular with planning policy, they have a recommendation that is actually something council needs to hear in order to plan for it. So it's not that you wouldn't want to do it, but how would you even plan for it if you didn't know? And I think it had to do with the schedule for reviewing impact fees, if I'm correct, that we were way behind on a few, and you may have even been sitting members at that time. So in order for you to know that you may want to consider in a budget, you need to know that somebody's brought it up. So thank you for that point. City Administrator Bobkowitz.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The item is included. There is a paragraph in the staff report regarding this. And just to clarify, it was not a part of their recommendation. Their recommendation was to approve it. It was a comment. And so I guess the mayor and I will work in the future to delineate comments. I think that there are likely comments on all matters before Planning Policy and Development Commission, which may not be included in a recommendation. Sometimes the comments might be included in a recommendation. So I think there is a distinction there. We'll need to make sure, and we'll talk with council leadership, which we did on several occasions on this particular item as well, I think just to get a better sense of that. We want to be responsible for items that are on the consent calendar, but we also want to share when there are recommendations from planning policy or any of your boards specifically to the council. In this instance, there was not. In this instance, the recommendation was approval, and there were additional comments which were included in the AB. So we'll work to streamline that in the future. But just to reemphasize that the recommendation was approval with no additional conditions. It was just the additional comments that were made, which again we'll have to sort through because we may end up having a lot more things on regular business if we include all of the comments that come as part of the approval process. But we'll work on that.
Thank you. Council President Hunt would like to make a comment.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt, and this is in response to the City Administrator's comments. I think, like I heard from Councilmember Walsh, the issue is more that we do have these commissions that make recommendations, and we want to value those. So if we could work on a process by which we can use these comments or recommendations, I mean, I think it is very clear that it is, whether it is formalized in that way, it says the commission requested that the council dedicate resources for the continued revision of areas of special flood hazard code amendments, and then there are two other things that they requested of the council. So I think they probably weren't a recommendation because it's a bit of an aside to the item that they were actually considering, much like this conversation right now. But I do think having a way to capture that would be valuable because, as the mayor said in her remarks, if we can keep these things on our radar, then less things will slip through. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. Great comment. I also think that after the budget discussions that council goes through, even just having a note back from the council president to a board or commission stating that, we evaluated different priorities during this budget cycle, and this is, this one either is going through in 2021 or it did not make it in 2021, just so it doesn't go into a vacuum. I think that's a great suggestion. I'm not seeing any more comments or questions at this point in time. The motion, if I could get that, oh, no, I do have it here. I don't. Can I, City Clerk, can I get the motion for this one in the chat box? Thanks.
Yes.
It has been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance number 2915, amending chapter 16.36 of the Issaquah Municipal Code relating to areas of special flood hazard, providing for severability and establishing an effective date. We'll go to a roll call vote. Thank you, City Clerk.
Councilmember Walsh?
Aye.
Councilmember DiMichele?
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman?
Aye.
Councilmember Hall?
Aye.
Council President Hunt?
Aye.
Councilmember Martz?
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray?
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. The next item under regular business this evening is AB 8002, utility rate adjustments. And this item was last before council at the June 23rd council study session. And I'd like to invite Interim Public Works Engineering Director Bob York to make a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you just great.
Oh, great. Good evening, Mayor, and good evening, council members. This is Bob York, Interim Public Works Engineering Director. And tonight, I will be discussing our utility rate study results for all three of our city-owned utilities. Water was talked about in June, and tonight we can talk about sewer and stormwater as well. Presenting with me is Sean Korn. He's our consultant, a rate study expert, project manager with HDR Engineering, and his team did all this number crunching. Next slide, please. So tonight we're here to request council approval for the adoption of water, sewer, and stormwater rates for the next 5-year period. That period would be 2021 through 2025. Next. And our recommendation would be to adopt ordinances that would provide those stated water, sewer, and stormwater rate adjustments for the implementation in the future years. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean Korn for the balance of the presentation, the person that did all the number crunching and can talk to you about what he came up with. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Appreciate the opportunity. This evening, I'll quickly walk through the purpose of the study, the background and key assumptions, and then we'll take a review of the overall water, sewer, and stormwater proposed rates and rate study results, as well as a quick review of the utility assistance programs. And then we'll talk real briefly on the water, sewer, and stormwater general facility charges, and then Mr. York and myself can answer any questions that you may have. As you may all remember, the purpose of the rate study is to provide sufficient revenues to operate and maintain the city's water, sewer, and stormwater utilities. That includes both operations as well as capital improvement needs. The results of the study will provide the city with cost-based rates and fees, so both water, sewer, stormwater rates and GFCs. And as we develop the study, we want to make sure we take into consideration our prudent financial planning criteria, such as debt service coverage ratios, prudent rate funding of capital, that's the renewal and replacement of the system on an ongoing basis, and maintain target reserve balances in case of emergencies. As we do this process, we use generally accepted methodologies that are tailored to the city's specific characteristics and customers for each utility. A little bit of background. Originally, the rate study results were presented to council in September and October of 2019 at study sessions. As we went through that process, the council requested additional information, alternatives, and analyses on the water supply alternatives. So we went back to look at those alternatives, as well as the impact of COVID as we were getting ready to bring that back to the city council. In June of this year, we presented the various options for the water supply alternatives and were directed by council to move forward with option 4, which was the purchase of discounted Cascade Water Alliance water in lieu of well 5 supply and delaying the central treatment plant until early 2030s. As we went through this analysis for the water, which was presented in June, as well as the sewer and stormwater, the capital plans have been updated as part of that process, and that did result in the no change in utility rates for 2021. So important aspect here as we look at the rate studies for all three, water, sewer, and stormwater, there's no proposed rate adjustment for 2021. The only change to that is that King County has proposed a 4.5% increase in the treatment rate. That equates to roughly $2 per month for the city's customers. That's the only change in the rates for 2021. All city rates are being held constant. That was really accomplished through the delaying of capital projects to smooth those rate adjustments and to reprioritize that as you went forward. As I mentioned, that also reflects the purchasing discounted Cascade water for purchase water. That was the option 4 from our June projection. And that did have an assumed long-term debt in there to borrow for specific capital projects of about 5%. So there are some upcoming major capital projects. Right now, that is a little bit, the current rates are lower than 5% as part of that. So we do have some ability there to gain some efficiency as you move forward. Again, the rates I'm showing are only for the collection rates. So Metro, King County provides the treatment. We're only looking at the city's costs for that. And just as a side note here, solid waste, that was not part of our study review, but there is no change in the 2021 King County solid waste pass-through as well. That's a 0% for the city's Recology customers. As we jump into the results of the analysis, as you can see here, the top half of this chart shows the annual percentage revenue increases for water, sewer, that's the collection only, and stormwater. 2020 has the adopted rates that are in place today. There is no change in 2021. And then you can see the percentage adjustments. Those percentage adjustments are applied to the average monthly bi-monthly bill on the bottom half of the sheet. And that shows you a rate based on a 3/4 inch service meter and 6 CCF, 100 cubic feet, of water per month for water and sewer. So that really in this bill, it's 12 CCF for the bi-monthly period. You can see again, there's no change in the overall bill for your average customer in 2021 or any customer. Again, the only change is the King County Metro pass-through of the treatment rate. And then as you move into 2022 through 2025, there is that annual percentage adjustment, and that equates to approximately, on average, a 6% annual change in the utility bill as you move forward throughout 2022 to 2025. As part of this, the city does have some utility assistance programs. There's a senior discount program, which is based on age and income. There's a low income rebate program that's based on income levels, as well as a COVID-19 bill relief payment plan. So just as a point of reference, there's around 90 accounts in total at the current time that are participating in these 3 programs in total as part of this. So there are resources, again, for your customers should they have issues with the current bill or as they move forward with the proposed rate adjustments. As we look at the water, sewer, and stormwater rates, this is the water rates for the typical customer. We have here the fixed charge, which varies by meter size. Again, no change in 2021. Those are adjusted across the board or equally as we go out through 2025. And the same with the consumption charges, the 5 different tiers, 0 to 4 CCF, 5 to 14, 15 to 30, 30 to 50, and 50 plus. Those are those rates. And then you can see the bi-monthly bill impacts for that typical residential customer. That 12 or the red bar, the middle bar in the chart, that's the same numbers as that prior chart. As we went through the process, we also have the general facility charges. And just as a reminder, a general facility charge is a one-time charge to bring equity between existing customers and new connections to the system. So when a new home connects to the city system, they pay for the capacity that they're going to use on that system. And so they buy into the existing system, and they pay for any costs that the city has funded to provide additional capacity to meet their needs. Those revenues are used by the city to fund growth-related debt or capital projects related to providing that capacity in the system. And these fees are really driven by Washington state law and how they are developed and how those revenues are used as part of that. So again, this is what a new home or business or a developer would pay when they connect to the system for each for water and sewer and stormwater. In late 2019, GFCs were adopted for sewer and stormwater. The water GFC was held at its current level as we were working through the water supply alternative process. As you move forward, we would recommend that for 2021, the GFCs be updated to reflect the annual inflationary index. That index is generally based on the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index, or ENR CCI. And per the city code, the city annually adjusts those GFCs based on that index, so year-over-year change, so that they reflect the costs that are incurred over time. These GFCs are updated at least every 5 years, so as part of a rate study process like we went through, or when your master plans or other planning documents are updated and there's changes to that capital improvement plan to meet future growth and capacity needs. And then finally, to summarize the water, sewer, and stormwater rate and GFC study. For the rate study, future revenue and rate adjustments are necessary starting in 2022. There are no changes in rates in 2021. Those changes or those increases are necessary to fund annual O&M increases, as well as provide funding for capital improvements that are going on in the system, the renewal and maintenance of the existing system, as well as to maintain strong financial metrics for each utility. There are no changes in the structure or how you bill your customers. Those have all remained constant, and each component of the rate has been adjusted equally. On the general facilities charge study, you have sewer, stormwater, and water GFCs for 2020, and then those future GFCs would be adjusted annually by that ENR CCI cost index to reflect the value of the inflationary impacts to construction costs. And with that, Mr. York and myself would be available for any questions that you all may have for us.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Bob. We have several more items on our agenda this evening. So at this point in time, I think I'm going to offer the City Council members a 5-minute break. And we will reconvene at around 9:20. As soon as I see 7 faces on the screen, we'll pull back together around 9:20. Thank you. Hang in there with us. Abe, are you out there? Okay, great. I'll just have a few second break before I start. Okay, I'm pulling us back from our 5-minute break back into our council meeting. And looking at the script, I believe where we are right now is it's time for Council President Hunt, before we move into council questions, to share or summarize any public comments that might have been received on this item.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. We did receive an email on this item from a member of the community, a longtime member of the community, that was opposed to the increase in the water rates, and was also expressing concern about growth, and that growth of the community was not providing value to the longtime residents. And that concludes the comments that we received on this.
Thank you, Council President. Does Council have any questions on the presentation tonight? Please start entering your name and question or comments inside the chat box. We'll start tonight with Council President Hunt.
Thank you. I wanted to ask some of the questions that the community members that gave public comment this evening asked. So one of them was about, and I think that the answer may have been in the presentation that was given, but just to clarify, one of the questions was why developers are not paying for the rate increase, or are developers not paying for a rate increase?
Sean, can you take a stab at that one?
Yeah, Sean Korn, HDR Engineering. Developers are paying for their share of the cost to provide capacity. One of those ways is through the general facility charges. So just like any other new home or business that has not been connected to the water, sewer, storm system, when they build a development or a home, they also pay those GFCs for those structures or connections that come to the system. In other cases, developers also put in the infrastructure to get to the city system, so they're also paying for it in that way. And then those customers or businesses would ultimately pay the rates as all other customers would as part of this.
Council President Hunt, does it answer your question?
It does, yes, thank you. And then my second question is, in the presentation, you stated that the city is not raising rates for 2021, and in the comments we had comments around that it was a 7% increase, and so I wondered if you could clarify what the increase over time, what that is.
Yes, again, Sean Korn with HDR Engineering. Those adjustments were a 7.5 for water. It was a 7.5% per year increase starting in 2022, and then 3.5% in sewer per year starting in 2022, and 5.5% for stormwater. The combined bill is an annual 6% increase in the overall average customer bill, starting in 2022, no change in 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up for questions is Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goodman here. I just had a process question. What is our policy for having items such as rate increases come to the council and be adopted on the first reading? I know we had this at work session, but I'm just curious.
Thank you. Bob or City Administrator Bobquist, who wants to take that question?
Madam Mayor, let me give that a try, and I'll ask to phone a friend and City Attorney Jim Haney as well. The Washington state law provides latitude for municipalities and how they adopt ordinances. The City of Issaquah and many other Washington state communities only require a single reading of an ordinance for passage. Other communities have other local laws that either require additional readings for particular types of ordinances or in some cases for all ordinances. So That has not been the practice here in Issaquah. My understanding is from time to time, the administration will make a judgment if an ordinance should have a second reading or a second consideration by the city council. But my understanding is that there has not really been there's nothing in the council's rules or in the municipal code that's directly related to that. Mr. Haney, I see you're on the screen. Do you want to add anything to that overview?
Well, I think the city administrator said it very well. There's nothing in state law or in the city code or in the council's rules of procedures that requires you to do a second reading. You can always do that if you wish to do that. Some cities do have council rules that require a second reading and say that no ordinance can be passed or that certain types of ordinances require a second reading. Or your council rules and your code do not require that.
May I have a follow-up question?
Sure, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. I guess the heightened awareness on my part was only because even though there's not a rate increase for 2021, it still would adopt a rate increase. And it also struck me interesting that there wasn't a public hearing, and so I don't know when one would be required. Could you, Jim, do you know the answer to that question, when a public hearing would be required?
There's generally not a requirement for public hearing for the raising of water, sewer, and stormwater rates. There is a requirement for public hearing for raising solid waste rates, but this is not solid waste, so garbage rates, basically. But not to raise water and sewer rates. There's no requirement for a public hearing. You can always have one, that's your choice, but there is no legal requirement that you have one.
Okay, I have a comment, but in sticking with Robert's rules, I'll allow the mayor to tell me whether she wants me to wait or not.
We have a couple more questions, so if you wouldn't mind waiting, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. Councilmember Zach Hall here. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me for the discussed Cascade Water Alliance rate increases. So I'm not sure how that would fit into this math if that were to be accepted by that board. But could someone kind of walk me through how that would impact this presentation if Cascade were to move forward with, maybe even just subjectively without numbers, but where we would see differences?
Thank you.
Bob York here. Sean, I think you were looking into this in more detail than I did, but can you take a stab at this again?
Absolutely, Sean Korn, HDR. We were talking with Cascade as we were finalizing and putting all these numbers together, and they sent us some information and some ranges as part of that. And we kind of got a best case, worst case from them for the next 3 years. And our numbers tied almost exactly to the worst case. So the good news is when they sent us that, we're at that worst case. So if it comes in lower than what they're projected over the next 3 years, then we're good with what our plan is at this point in time. Does that answer your question, Councilmember Hall?
I wonder if you could explain it to me like I'm younger. I didn't quite understand that.
No problem. I apologize.
John, before you start on that again, Bob, I'm not sure it was in your presentation materials or not, but regardless of where a resident gets their water from in Issaquah, whether they're provided directly from Cascade or some sort of blend or from well water, our philosophy has been to charge a blended rate so that all of our residents receive the same increase. And I'm not sure if you covered that in your presentation. I just want to get that on the table, and now go ahead and try and reword this a little bit for Councilmember Hall's benefit.
Absolutely, Sean Korn with HDR. So as we went through this process, Cascade Water Alliance provided us with the original projections of the purchased water for each year, as well as the assumptions for the discounted water purchases for the water supply alternatives. When they gave us those, that was in the midst of them developing their different budgets and projections that you referenced earlier in the meeting. About a week ago, Cascade provided us with the ranges that they were working with their staff and board and with you all on the board on as they were developing those rate projections. Our costs in our model and in the rates that we have included tonight cover all of the costs that Cascade would be projecting, the high end of those costs that Cascade would be projecting over the next 3 years. So in their worst case scenario, our rates that we're talking about tonight for 21, 22, and 23 would cover those costs. If it's lower, then that provides some additional revenues for the city's water utility.
Mayor?
Yep, I know, got it just in time. Is that better, Councilmember Hall?
It much better. Thank you. My apologies.
I thank you for your question because there are probably many out there that are watching that want it explained in the exact same way that you do. So thank you for that. It's very good. I am not seeing any other questions right now in the chat box. I'll give a few minutes to see. And if not, we will cycle back to Councilmember Goodman's comment.
Well, my comment is just, thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. My comment is just that I'm curious what my fellow council members think about a first reading of a rate increase ordinance in the middle of a pandemic. I guess that sounds like a leading question, doesn't it? But those are just the facts. So I'm just curious what everyone thinks. Thanks.
Great. Councilmember, Deputy Council President Ray, are you going to make a comment on that or something?
Yeah. Even though this is the first time that we've looked at this agenda bill, we've been talking about the water system plan and the rate study for, Bob, tell me, how long has it been? It's been, 2 years that this is about the 4th or 5th time that this has come before us. And all of the information that was presented here was presented in the rate studies as best I recall. So I guess this is the first time we've seen this agenda bill, but I'm thinking this is not at all the first time we've seen this information about projected rate increases. And quite honestly, I think the work that Public Works Engineering has done with our good consultant friends to keep the rates down has been significant. So, no one wants to raise the rates, but, this increases, this isn't new to me. So that's my only reaction to this proposal. What I do want to build on what Councilmember Hall was saying, though, and the response, which is our rate increases cover a worst case scenario from Cascade Water Alliance if they raise their rates. So there may be, I think, some latitude to not raise the rates as much based on that information. So I may be misinterpreting that, but that's my interpretation of what Mr. Corn was saying relative to the factoring the information from Cascade.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Ray. At this point in time, I'm not seeing anyone additional signing up in the chat box. I'd like to comment, but I'll give it a few seconds. Let's go to Councilmember Hall.
Thanks, Mayor Pauly. Zach Hall here. I think I'm comfortable voting on this agenda bill tonight only because there's no rate increase next year. But I think Councilmember Goodman has stumbled upon a really good idea for consideration in the future, and that is how many touches do we want proposals or policies that have rate increases to come before the council. And I think, I don't know, how often do we do a retreat? I think it's a worth discussion. Even broader policies, how many touches it should have, and if we're required to have a public hearing. Even if we're not required, I'm sure there are scenarios where I think it's probably the benefit to us and the community to have a public hearing anyways. So I'd be interested in having the discussion. So thank you, Councilmember Goodman, for bringing it up. Good idea.
And just as a reminder, our council has been working towards doing some early in the year retreats I think last year may have been our first, but it's something that we're hoping that if you had issues for looking at council rules, that would give an opportunity early in the year to do that. So we will go to Council President Hunt. Oh, sorry. I'm not seeing any more comments. Would anyone care to make a motion, Council President Hunt?
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I would like to make a motion. I move to 1, adopt ordinance number 2916, amending section 13.24.110 parenthesis C of the Issaquah Municipal Code relating to water rates and establishing January 1, 2021 as the effective date. 2, adopt ordinance number 2917, amending section 13.30.050 parenthesis C of the Issaquah Municipal Code relating to stormwater rates and establishing January 1st, 2021 as the effective date. 3, adopt ordinance number 2918, amending section 13.70.040 of the Issaquah Municipal Code relating to sewer rates and establishing January 1st, 2021 as the effective date.
And Deputy Council President Ray.
I'll second. This is Chris Ray. I'll second the motion.
So it has been moved and seconded. Is there any additional discussion? Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I am confident that we have vetted our options on this. We have had a recent work session and we have had many other touches in terms of presentations of our different options, and in fact sent the staff back and asked them to reconsider their options and could we have an option that would be more cost effective for the ratepayers. So I am confident that we have vetted those options over time and have taken into account the rate increase, minimizing the rate increase while making sure that we have the infrastructure, we're able to maintain the infrastructure that we need to have safe water and meet our requirements for the community. So I am confident that we have vetted those options over time, and I think that I am in support of the motion at this point. But as I just wanted to clarify that we have talked about this before because it is the first reading of this ordinance, but it's certainly not the first time we've had a conversation about this. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. Moving to Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. I support the ordinance. Just to be clear, my comments had nothing to do with whether we've thoroughly vetted it or whether I or any of us was not aware of that what we've discussed just as recently as June. That really wasn't the issue. The issue is really a rate, like I said before, a rate increase, even though it's a little over a year away, in the middle of a pandemic with one reading. I think we should be super careful with what we do when we do it. We've been talking about a lot about what other organizations do and whether they should be raising rates. And so I think we should be just super cognizant of that and what we're doing. But of course, I agree with it. We've done terrific work. I agree with those comments, but I just, in response to comments about awareness and vetting, that those were not my concerns. But anyway, I do support it, and I thank everybody for all the work, and I thank this administration for diving a whole lot deeper into what our options could be, and I really appreciate how this has come out. In terms of rate increases compared to what we were, the many discussions we had before and what it could be. So I'm pleased with what it is, even though it is a rate increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. I'm not seeing any other commenters in the chat box right now. I will go back to reread the motion. The motion before the council is to adopt ordinance number 2916, amending section 13.24.110 C of the Issaquah Municipal Code relating to water rates and establishing January 1st, 2021 as the effective date. Adopting ordinance number 2917, amending section 13.30.050 C of the Issaquah Municipal Code relating to stormwater rates and establishing January 1st, 2021 as the effective date. And adopting ordinance number 2918, amending section 13.70.040 of the Issaquah Municipal Code relating to sewer rates and establishing January 1st, 2021 as the effective date. City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember DiMichele,
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall,
Aye.
Council President Hunt,
Aye.
Councilmember Martz,
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray,
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays. Mayor Polly, you're muted.
That really is strike 3. I'm out. Vicki, you have to take over. I'm done. That was a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. I just wanted to spend a few seconds telling Sean and Bob that their presentation tonight was one of the most, and take this with a grain of salt, understandable that I've seen as a council member. This is a topic that is enormously confusing to the public. I thought you did a great job with your creativity in looking at how to incorporate a solution that would allow us not to have a rate increase for 2 years. I am just indebted to you for doing that and taking that effort and making this all work out when there was an option for us to do it. So just thank you so much for the great work you did tonight. Really, really good job. Thank you both.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Oh, very welcome, Sean. Very welcome, Bob. Next item on our agenda this evening is AB 8005, Village Theater Funding. This is the first time that this item is coming before the City Council, and I'd like to invite Parks and Community Services Director Jeff Watling to present the item.
Mayor, thank you. Good evening, Council. Can you hear me? I see head nods. Great.
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly. Thank you, Jeff.
Great. This item before you seeks an additional $25,000 allocation and emergency funding to Village Theater. That would be coming from the Municipal Arts Fund. As you probably know, the art community has not been immune to the COVID impacts. This is especially the case for Village Theater. As our only nonprofit brick and mortar performing arts facility and agency, COVID has really hit them especially hard, as well as similar performing arts facilities throughout the region. Village Theater serves as an anchor for Old Town, for Front Street, and certainly for our new Creative Art District. COVID has, as I said earlier, been really difficult for Village Theater to navigate through. Our arts program coordinator, Amy Dukes, has done a great job throughout COVID reaching out to all of our arts partners, not just Village Theater, but all of our contracted partners to see how they're doing, to respond, to find ways to support them in their efforts. And so in that work, really reaching out to all agencies, her communications, her conversations with Village Theater, we really began to understand they had to close their doors really early. They've taken very hard measures to reduce expenses significantly, including staff, and are really currently operating in a very lean hold position. They want to reopen. They want to continue, and they want to be that anchor on Front Street. And we certainly recognize as administration that's a priority for us as well. Exhibit A in the agenda bill tonight is a letter from Village Theater that outlines their request. That's the same letter that was presented to Art Commission. Speaking of Arts Commission, in this effort to support this cultural anchor of Issaquah, the Art Commission unanimously recommended this emergency allocation of $25,000 to Village Theater at their July 7th meeting. If approved, we will amend the 2020 arts contract with Village Theater to include this emergency funding along with their $50,000 allocation. A note about the Municipal Art Fund real quick. Amy has been doing a great job, and I've been working with her on managing that fund. As you would imagine, We've been looking for creative ways and have been working with our partners, as I said earlier, to reduce expenditures and reduce expenditures significantly here in 2020 for a variety of reasons. But one of those is to make sure we're maintaining a healthy fund balance and remaining nimble enough, not only this year, but as we look into 2021 to respond to emergencies such as this, but also make sure as we navigate through COVID, we have a healthy municipal art fund and we continue with the tradition of arts in this community. Remains a huge priority for us. One last item to also point out in the agenda bill, if approved, this motion states our commitment to include this $25,000 unanticipated fund would come back to you in a subsequent 2020 budget amendment. So it's the end of my brief staff report. Request your consideration and approval tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Watling. Council President Hunt, did you have any comments that you need to summarize before we go into Q&A with the council?
Thank you. I do not have comments on this item.
Thank you very much. Council, let's start lining up in the chat box for questions. I see Deputy Council President Ray is there. You're up.
Hi, this is Chris Ray. Thank you, Mayor Polly. Just a quick question for Director Watling. What has happened this year to the inflow of funds to the Arts Fund? Because they're driven by ticket sales and they've gotten crushed worse than just about everything.
Yeah, no, great point. And as I was saying, managing that municipal art fund, not only in expenditures, but revenues, you're right. A majority of revenues come in through admissions tax. We received a pretty healthy portion of admissions tax in the first quarter. That obviously stopped pretty abruptly in March. We're anticipating no further revenue coming in, and still, as we manage expenditures, would anticipate still having a healthy fund balance at the end of this year of about $300,000. So managing both, understanding revenues are going to be extremely limited, and managing those expenditures is a top priority.
Quick follow-up, if I might. So what is our annual outlay from the Arts Fund? What has it been historically, and what do we envision it would be in 2021?
Outlay for the entire fund?
Yeah. What I'm trying to get to is we've got $400 and some odd thousand in it. We got an extra 25 here. Revenue is way off. So in the short term, we've got fund balance to cover us. What does 2021 look like, though? Because I'm not expecting we're going to have lots of ticket receipts in 2021 either.
Yeah, great point. And as we are just putting together our proposed budget for the mayor, I've been working with Amy, and we are being very, very conservative with revenues and being very conservative with expenditures. And I think what we're wanting to propose and what you'll see before you is a fund balance at the end of 21 that would still remain in the $200,000 range of a fund balance.
Great, thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Give it another second or two. Not seeing anything in the chat box. Would anyone? Oh, I am seeing. Oh, there we go. Council President Hunt shows up a little bit late sometimes.
No problem. Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I wondered if the Arts Commission, what their plans are for the funds, if there are other items that, or other businesses, other things that they're thinking of supporting this year, just because the Village Theater is struggling right now. But as you also mentioned, there are other arts businesses that are as well. And so I just wondered if they had any thoughts on that or thoughts on future steps that they might take.
I can't speak for all of them, but I do know that as we had a discussion in July, really, Village Theater is different than the other ones. Again, as bricks and mortar, when you look at their overhead, when you look at their encumbered costs, it's very different than many of our other arts partners. Do not have that level of overhead, and so support that we've been able to provide them. And again, Amy's done a great job. Looks at either modifying or amending a contract, finding other ways to support them. But not having to do it in a sort of monetary support way like this, given, again, they don't have that bricks and mortar overhead that Village Theater does.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. I see Councilmember DiMichele has a comment.
There we go. This is Councilmember DiMichele. I will very strongly support this motion. And I think I've said this before many times, but I'll repeat it, that the arts are wonderful. They're part of our culture, but they're also a tremendous economic engine for our city and have been for a long time. And the Village Theater is certainly central to that factor in our community. I was surprised myself reading the letter from Rob Hunt that they had laid off 168 people. I had no idea that that was that large of an operation, although when you think about it, of course it is. And then you think of all of the attendant positions that are affected by those layoffs, and then all of the businesses in town that depend on those shows going on, and so that they can generate income. It's just a huge linchpin to the economy and to the culture in our city. So I will be supporting this. I also want to commend Jeff and Amy for the job that they're doing to preserve the funds, because the Municipal Art Fund, because whenever it is that we start to move back to normal, again, the arts are going to play such a huge role in our economic recovery, and we have to have the funds there to help that along. And so thank you so much for the work you're doing, Jeff, and please convey that to Amy as well. So I will be voting yes on this very strongly.
Thank you, Councilmember DiMichele. Not seeing any other comments at this time. Looking for a motion, and I will go to Council President Hunt.
Thank you. I move to direct the Finance Director to include an additional $25,000 for Village Theater in a subsequent 2020 budget amendment utilizing the Municipal Art Fund, and authorize the amendment of Village Theater's 2020 Arts Grants contract to increase the funding amount from $50,000 to $75,000.
And Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman here. I second the motion.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any council discussion? Let's start with Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I will be supporting the motion. I appreciate that the Arts Commission looked at this, and I value that they voted unanimously to support this with the Arts Fund, Municipal Arts Fund allocation. And also, this is one of the treasures on our treasures list. The other, I learned a lot about this from listening to the Recovery Task Force and the presentation that was presented there about the challenges that Village Theater is facing, and also wanted to point out that there are other businesses that are in a unique position. The other one that I am thinking of that came to Recovery Task Force was the Cougar Mountain Zoo. And so there are other businesses as well, but this is specific to the arts, and the Municipal Arts Fund is able to be allocated in this way, so I appreciate that. But we have a lot of other businesses that we could use a creative approach to supporting as well, and I know that the Economic Development Department is working on that too. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. Seeing no further questions, the motion before Council is to direct the Finance Director to include an additional $25,000 for Village Theater in a subsequent 2020 budget amendment utilizing the Municipal Art Fund. And authorize the amendment of Village Theater's 2020 art grant contract to increase the funding amount from $50,000 to $75,000. And clerk, can you please call the roll for voting?
Yes, Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Martz.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
Councilmember DiMichele.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays. Mayor, you're muted.
Almost exited the meeting there. Okay. Yes, a little bit off today, just have to say. Okay, that passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda this evening is AB 8006. It's the second 2020 budget amendment, and the ask before council this evening is to adopt the ordinance. I'd like to invite Senior Budget Analyst Susie Monsell to make a presentation.
Susie, we can't hear you.
Oh. She's just trying to make her mayor feel good, that's all. Nice try, Susie.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. It was a moment of solidarity, I promise. This is Susie Monsell, the Senior Budget Analyst. I am here to give I promise, a very brief presentation on the second 2020 budget amendment. If we move, there we go. The purpose of tonight's budget amendment is to implement the repayment of the 2019 interfund loan between the sewer fund and the street capital fund. It implements budget changes associated with earlier council action, as well as various corrections to the 2020 budget. There are a total of 7 budget amendments included in tonight's proposal. They are divided into 3 categories. The first is the previously approved requests. So these are items that were already approved in concept by the City Council via other agenda bills. And this budget amendment includes 3 previously approved items. The second type is budget corrections. These are items that are technical corrections to the 2020 adopted budget that were identified subsequent to the City Council adopting the budget. And this amendment contains 3 budget corrections. And the third type is a budget adjustment. These are requests that are new or and that have not been previously considered by the City Council. And this budget amendment includes 1 adjustment. So for looking first at the previously approved requests, the first is AB 8003, which was just a couple of weeks ago, approved $41,900 of additional water fund revenues for the Forest Rim Reservoir retrofits and Cougar Ridge automatic isolation valve projects as a result of a higher project bid than anticipated in the 2020 adopted budget. This amendment would increase expenditures in the water fund by $41,900. The second previously approved request was AB 7983 back in June, which authorized the city to enter into an agreement with King County to receive one-time funding totaling $2,000 to help to provide housing stability during COVID-19 response and recovery. This amendment records the $2,000 of new revenue to the general fund and authorizes an equivalent amount of spending out of the general fund. The third previously approved request, which is really the main purpose of tonight's amendment, is the various transfers needed to repay that 2019 interfund loan between the sewer fund and the street capital fund. To provide a little background for our newer council members, this interfund loan was initiated in in November of 2019 to begin work on TR 031, which was the Southeast 43rd Way or Providence Point signal improvements prior to securing debt financing in early 2020. This allowed the project to begin work in 2019 with the understanding that when debt financing was secured, the loan would be repaid with interest. With the debt financing now secured, this amendment seeks to transfer the bond proceeds to the city funds where the capital projects that were intended to be supported are budgeted, as well as repay that interfund loan and the resulting interest. There are 3 budget corrections included in this amendment as well. The first is in December of 2019, the city completed a different interfund loan, which was a repayment from the Street Capital Fund to the Fleet Fund, as was adopted in 2019. That amendment granted the loan repayment of $3,142,000, including the initial $3 million loan and subsequent interest. That interest has since been recalculated. It was based on an estimate, and this resulted in an overpayment of $1,057 that will need to be returned to the mitigation fund by way of the Street Capital Fund, following the same path as that original loan repayment and interest. The 5th item, excuse me, a little too fast, was that the city under budgeted the cost of the 2020 Washington City's Insurance Authority, or the WCIA, annual payment. This is our insurance provider, based on an estimate received in July of 2019. So while the general insurance fund, the city's fund, has sufficient balance to absorb that extra cost, the city will need the increased expenditure authority to pay that annual invoice. The 6th item and the 3rd budget correction item was due to an error in the 2019 budget. The authorized expenditures for PK008, which was the bike park, exceeded the budgeted revenue by $19,809. The intended revenue source was park mitigation and impact fees. This amendment just transfers that discrepancy, that $19,809, from the mitigation fund to the park capital fund to support the previously authorized project expenditures. It doesn't reflect any change in project expenditures or in scope of the project. It just fixes a mismatched transfer in the 2019 budget. The 7th and final amendment included tonight is the only budget adjustment, and the 2019 park capital project of the Falls Drive Trail improvements, which was TL001, was completed in 2019, returning approximately $56,000 to the park capital fund balance. This amendment appropriates $50,000 of these unspent funds to support emergency trail repairs needed on the Squawk Mountain Access Trail near the Kalkari development. And the original source of this $50,000 was real estate excise tax, or REIT 1 revenue. So with all of those amendments together, this just summarizes the impact on each fund that would be impacted by these amendments. The net impact across all funds would be a hit of $424,979. The impact to the general fund would be a net 0 impact. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. I am, of course, happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Susie. Council President Hunt, before we move into council questions, can you let me know if you have received any public comments on this topic?
Thank you. We did not receive public comments on this topic.
Great. Thank you for that. Looking into the chat box to see if there are any questions on the amendment. And if not, if someone would care to make a motion. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I move to adopt ordinance number 2919, amending the 2020 budget as set forth in ordinance number 2888 and amended in ordinance number 2908 concerning revenues, expenditures, and fund balance for various funds for the year 2020.
And Deputy Council President Ray?
This is Chris Ray. I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to please proceed with the roll call vote.
My apologies. Councilmember Hall.
Aye. Sorry, caught me off guard.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Martz.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
Councilmember DeMichelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda this evening is for good of the order. If anybody has any items, could you raise your hand in the chat box? Oh, there we go. Councilmember Hall.
Thanks, Mayor Polly. I'll be really brief. This is Zach Hall. Council President Hunt brought up Cougar Mountain Zoo, and I just wanted to share with the council 2 weekends ago, I went to the zoo for the first time in maybe 20 years, and I was thoroughly impressed with the operation that they have going on there, especially given COVID, making sure everyone is separated, requiring face masks, but also just the sheer amount of new exhibits and animals that are there, and the carekeepers that I met who are just so dedicated to their relationships with the animals. So you guys should all go again.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Hall. We have a really good partner up there at the zoo, that is for sure, and they've worked really hard to make this work during COVID and provide our community with an opportunity to visit again. So I plus one you on that. Any other comments for good of the order? Okay, the upcoming council meetings will all be held virtually. There's a City Council special session meeting Monday, August 10th, and the potential agenda items include the Issaquah Police Accountability, Equity, and Human Services Action Plan, and there will be an executive session as well. And the City Council study session, Tuesday, August 11th, the potential agenda items include quarterly reporting and revenue forecasting. The August 17th City Council meeting has been canceled, and the next regular City Council meeting will be on Tuesday, September 8th at 7 p.m. And again, that is in line with what Councilmember Martz was saying. August tends to be a month where we encourage everyone to take a break. The last item we have today is our executive session, and as was earlier announced, there will be an executive session this evening to discuss pending or potential litigation per 42.30.110(1)(I). This item is expected to last, and I'm going to say 20 minutes, recognizing that it may take up to 30. No action is anticipated to follow an open session, and we will now recess into executive session at 10:06 p.m. I ask the clerk to move anyone who is not part of the closed session to the virtual lobby, and those in the lobby are welcome to stay on the line until the meeting is reconvened. I'm assuming, and head nods are fine, that you are fine recognizing the potential length of the meeting, but actually having me call it a little shorter?
Okay, and I have readmitted Gabe, and it looks like we still have David Johnson on the call. So Mayor Polly, we should just check in with Gabe to ensure he's got the live stream going again.
Great, I'll do that. Thank you, Gabe. So we are back in open session at 10:22 p.m. and there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned at 10:22 p.m. Thank you all.